Yes.
The Leaf Spring Army sends its regards.
Hello, everyone. I am the Enforcer, and I'm accompanied by Enforcer Matt.
And good evening, folks. It's Enforcer Matt, and welcome back to day 1303 of the War News stream. And we have some pretty big news today that Venezuela's raised their force posture in the Caribbean for a war at sea. We've also seen that Iran has launched a new ballistic missile test today, and also Poland is warning of potential new drone incursion attempts even after the last one. So very big news, and it's good to see you all once again.
And of course, we're going to be covering the past 24 hours of news from around the world, as significant developments have once again been occurring over those past 24 hours alone throughout the entirety of the world. We have been able to hear that inside of Europe, it appears that the armed forces of Ukraine on the front lines near the Pokrovsk front have started a large and significant offensive, which was announced today by the president of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelenskyy. At this time, Ukrainian armed forces have been able to complete 3 complete encirclements of the Russian Federation's armed forces north of Pokrovsk with the 425th Assault Regiment, among many other units of the Ukrainian 1st National Guard Corps, now conducting further actions to push the Russian Federation away from the northern flank of the city of Pokrovsk. This is one of the largest and most successful offensives that we've seen so far, and within a 24-hour period alone, Ukrainian armed forces have reclaimed a whopping 170 square miles of ground in just the first opening day of the offensive alone, according to Ukrainian commanders and their up-to-date reports. Outside of that, we have been able to hear that the Republic of Venezuela has openly stated that they are now prepared for a large war at sea with the United States of America. Venezuelan armed forces have been moved to the islands off of their coast in the northern regions and are apparently attempting to face down the United States of America and its armed forces, which are currently heavily based out of the U.S. overseas territory of Puerto Rico, with U.S. Southcom forces of the USS Jason Dunham, the USS Lake Erie, and multiple other fighting vessels within the area, along with the amphibious ready group supporting the 22nd Marine Expeditionary Unit, or MU, are currently within the area and awaiting any further orders from the United States of America or any other further actions that will be taken against Venezuela. It It does appear, on top of that, that Nicolas Maduro is preparing for an actual war at any moment now, as we have also seen that Nicolas Maduro appears to be hiding inside of his bunker in the southern side of Caracas, as a large amount of security forces have been seen and are present around the security perimeter of this bunker, heavily suggesting that there is a large amount of activity at the bunker or that Nicolas Maduro is directly inside of it. On top of that, we have been able to hear that the United States Coast Guard has been conducting anti-narcotic operations today near to the area of the Baja Peninsula, largely an extent of the anti-cartel actions that have been stated by the United States, and we were able to see the low-visibility vessel transiting the area near to the direction of the Baja Peninsula was seized today by the United States Coast Guard. The United States of America has also reopened an interest into retaking the Bagram Air Force Base inside of the nation of Afghanistan, although we're not entirely sure what that will be involved or what will be involved in trying to retake Bagram Air Force Base. It does appear that rumors are suggesting that the United States government may be in attempted negotiations with the Taliban to see if the United States can peacefully return and possibly pay some sort of a leasing fee to the Taliban for the availability or the openness of the airbase to U.S. forces. The North Koreans are continuing to show off new drones and reconnaissance equipment that they have been fielding inside of their country, an attempt to try and make North Korea look far more dangerous, or at least far more able in their military prowess than they have appeared, at least in their time during the Kursk offensive in Ukraine. Another 7.8 magnitude earthquake has also hit the Kamchatka Peninsula, which is quite significant, and about the third one in less than a month, and we've been able to hear inside the Middle East that the Islamic Republic of Iran has conducted a new missile test today of an unidentified type of missile, while the USS Nimitz has transited the area of the Persian Gulf and is now inside the Gulf of Oman. The state of Israel also intercepted Houthi ballistic missiles today inside of southern Israel, and also were continuing their airstrikes against Hezbollah, while their ongoing offensive against the Hamas inside the Gaza Strip is ongoing. Multiple drone debris have been found on the coastlines of Latvia and Bulgaria, which are both conducting military investigations at this moment of the incidents, while Poland also today had to contend with an attempted Russian drone incursion of their country and has publicly announced that they are going to be bringing all bomb shelters in the country to an operational status, and also creating an app that citizens can download inside of Poland to be able to find the nearest available bomb shelters in the event of airstrikes. The Russian Federation is still dealing with economic downsides or spirals at this moment inside of their country, as we are still hearing even more apocalyptic news coming out of their major industrial concerns. We have a huge amount of news to cover, and these are just the big headlines, folks. These aren't even all of the little pieces of news that we have in between, but it has been another significant day in news, and we are going to be making sure to get y'all through each and every single bit of detail and information that we've been able to get over just those past 24 hours alone. And so, moving us on into the major news of the night, now that we've gotten through the whole introduction of what we are going to be talking about, we are going to be moving first and foremost into the topic of Venezuela, as we have been able to hear that it appears that the United States is getting incredibly close to going to an armed confrontation with Venezuela, or at least the Venezuelans are preparing for that eventuality to be in the very near future. According to statements made today by the Venezuelan Armed Forces, or largely by the Venezuelan Defense Minister Lopez, in a direct quote by the Defense Minister, he stated, "We are raising our operational readiness facing the Caribbean. We must elevate our operational readiness for a scenario of armed conflict at sea." It does appear quite likely at this moment that an armed conflict may be happening between the United States of America and Venezuela in the very short future, possibly within the next 2 months. The Venezuelans have also continued to move more forces out onto the islands just over their coast near northern Venezuela, which we can actually see on satellite footage here. These are fairly small islands, and one of the largest ones is actually the Isla La Orchila, which is right here. This is one of the few that are actually somewhat sizable, and even still, it's not really that big. At the widest, this thing is about 3.5 miles wide, and this thing is also at its longest about 6.5 miles in length. Not an incredibly large island to be basing armed forces on, but there are a chain of smaller islands here on the northern coast of Venezuela that the Venezuelan armed forces have been moving on to. And we were able to hear the announcement of military exercises being conducted on a large number of these islands over the course of today. Tanks, air defenses, and electronic electronic warfare capabilities are all being deployed to these islands near to where the U.S. Navy searched a tuna fish boat the last week and apparently found a little bit more than tuna. I gotta tell you, that thing stank, but not in the terms of fish. It stank in terms of its criminality, Johnson. But beyond that,
Tell you what, the rumor is on the street that they were weighing their tuna in kilos. That's the word on the street. But you gotta hear that from credible sources because I'm not sure about that. It sounds crazy. Also, by the way, Enforcer, can you bump up my volume just a little bit? I'm hearing from people I'm 25% too quiet. Can you bump that up real quick, please?
Can you like try and fix your microphone settings, by the way, because I was noticing that and I was like, I think that might just be my ears, maybe not hearing you too well today. Is there any way
my settings are the same. It's on your end with OBS or something.
OBS has stayed the same forever. Like I always have to put you down a little bit, but how about now?
Okay, so how do I sound now to folks, by the way? Am I sounding generally right, or am I sounding too quiet, too loud, or which one it is? We'll wait to see what the chat says in just a minute.
And we'll see, because I bumped you up a pretty good bit. But nevertheless, we were able to also see inside of the area that it appears that Maduro may be hiding inside of his bunker south of the city of Caracas. As we were able to hear that Venezuelan forces apparently have arrived in the area, this incredibly blurry footage, equivalent to the quality of that of a discovered Bigfoot sighting, is what we could see here, showing the area around the bunker. But we can see, at least in the viewpoint that someone with a cataract would have of looking at this bunker, that we could see some sort of a soldier of some type standing around the security perimeter inside of southern Caracas. I have no reason why the camera quality was this poor, but it is quite interesting, and it is showing us that there is a more pronounced amount of activity around the secure bunker than normal, possibly suggesting that the president of Venezuela, Nicolas Maduro, may be inside of that bunker at that moment, or they may be preparing the bunker for him to enter at some point in a later date. Still, it appears that the situation is quite tense, and the United States of America is continuing to show off and display its force readiness inside of Southcom Command, including displays of the U.S. Marines F-35Bs, which are currently inside of the area of Puerto Rico, near to the city of Ponce. We also got to see more pictures. I've got to be honest with y'all at this point, Southcom is kind of just publishing the same pictures at this point. This is the exact same pictures that they published about a week and a half ago of the hovercraft making landfall, escorted by the AH-1Zs for air cover. We also saw another picture of these AH-1Zs and the UH-1Y Venom back there in the background, flying around the area. And we also got one last picture of one of the Marines' hovercraft, which was deployed from the USS Iwo Jima. Still, it is at least a forced posturing in a sense, with the pictures continuously being republished, and once again trying to display to the U.S. public that there is a large amount of military presence inside of Puerto Rico, and most importantly to the Venezuelans, that there is a large military presence inside of Puerto Rico. It is a little bit hard to say, at least at the moment, exactly what's going to be going on here in the future, or what the U.S. military's plan is for dealing with the Venezuelans, but we do want to point out that the amount of forces that are present within the area, at least physically under Southcom Command currently, are somewhat low. We only see that the 22nd MEU, which is about 3,500 men, is inside of Puerto Rico at the moment, along with their amphibious ready group, which generally is more so a supporting role than a combatant role. And then we also know about 4 early Berg-class destroyers, a Freedom-class littoral combat ship, and a Ticonderoga-class missile cruiser that are within the area, along with those 10 F-35s and some rotary airlift wings that are a part of the United States Marine Corps and attached to the amphibious ready group. In general, while that sounds like a decent amount, it's not really an incredibly large amount, and once again, conducting any kind of an offensive operation against the nation of Venezuela with a force present that is at this size would be somewhat challenging, and would be a pretty daunting task for really any commander, no matter how competent they are. We are trying to see what the United States is doing within the area and try and get a general pulse on the situation, but that is incredibly hard to get because the current administration is being fairly non-transparent with the sort of information as to what our general plan is within this area or what the path ahead is generally going to be looking like. Nevertheless, a lot of people have been talking about whether or not Maduro will attack first, as the force posturing on the islands north of Venezuela today is generally suggesting that the Venezuelans may be attempting to prepare some sort of an armed action against the United States if we violate their territorial waters again and attempt to seize another tuna boat or another crack boat. A lot of people have been talking about that over the course of the stream so far. And Matthew, what are people thinking about that? And what are you thinking about that as well?
All right. So we did hear today that Venezuela raised their operational readiness status in preparation for a potential armed conflict at sea. And obviously, we are seeing these military exercises being carried out by Venezuela, and we're still seeing the ongoing exercises by the U.S. Navy as well. So the big question is, will Maduro be the first to attack the U.S. forces, or will it be the other way around? And it looks like 39% said actually the United States will set up a provocation, while 25% said the U.S. will attack Maduro first, and 21% said Maduro will be the one to attack the United States forces first. And this one's a bit tricky because Maduro is getting anxious. I think that's proof today that he's raising his operational status. He's getting very anxious and very worried, and you have to sort of understand where he's coming from. Right now, he is at the mercy of the U.S. forces that are literally knocking on his door and about to beat his door down. So, understandably, he's getting very, very scared. But he should be scared, though, because he's teamed up the wrong side. He teamed up with China, and also he's helping to pump drugs into the United States. So, he's on the losing team, without a doubt. So, I would say the odds of Maduro panicking and attacking the U.S. first are probably very low. I would say the odds are that the U.S. would probably be the first to strike the Maduro regime in limited missile strikes inside of Venezuela. That's probably the most likely answer right there. So I'm with the 25%. I think it's going to be the U.S. Hitting Maduro first. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say that we are trying to set up a provocation at the moment to get Maduro to strike us. And I'll be honest with y'all, I think that we are going to hold off until that happens. As far as the United States needs for diplomatic justification on an international level, we need the Venezuelans to attack us first, and that's what we're trying to do right now. Actually, to be honest with y'all, as far as the historical parallels are going at the moment, I would say that this is very analogous to the Mexican-American War that occurred in 1848 between the United States and the Mexican Empire during that time. If any of y'all know, we had a president during that period of history, and I believe his name was James Polk, and I want to make sure that I'm getting this correct because he was a fairly important guy, and he served one term. This is the guy. So James Polk told the United States when he was running for presidential election, if you vote for me, we're going to go to war with Mexico, and that's all I'm going to do. Like, that was his whole thing. So everyone voted for him, and in 1848, he actually ended up getting us into a war with Mexico, and we won it hands down. It was an uncontested victory. But outside of that, what we did to get into that situation was that we sent the U.S. Army into Texas, which Texas had now been absorbed by that point into the United States as a state and was no longer an independent country. And we just marched U.S. forces around on the Texas border, which actually was somewhere more so around San Antonio back then than it was the Rio Grande. And eventually the Mexicans got pissed off enough at that they actually shot at us, which gave us the justification to say, oh, the Mexicans shot at us, they started the war, let's go get them. And then we went to war with Mexico, we ended up beating them pretty badly, and that's largely how we got most of the western part of the United States in the modern day between California, Nevada, Utah, Colorado, Arizona, and New Mexico, except for the small little slither down here just south of Tucson, which was then later acquired in the Gadsden Purchase, along with the rest of Texas that you see in the modern day. That actually wasn't a part of Texas originally. That was generally how we started the Mexican-American War in 1848. And as far as the justifications that we're using in the modern day, I would say that this is incredibly similar to that. We're pretty much parading around the U.S. forces directly in the line of Venezuelan fire and conducting actions that, on an international level, are clearly provocative. We are stopping drug trades and, of course, cartel vessels. We're destroying cartel vessels that are carrying drugs, and we're also seizing tuna boats that aren't carrying bluefin. They're carrying that stuff called white snow. And so, generally, our actions are entirely legal, and on top of that, are being conducted against terrorist forces. But the issue is that these vessels are also Venezuelan, which is where the intersection of interests, or more so the conflict of interests, starts to come into play with Venezuela. This is technically a violation of their sovereignty, but at the same time, we're also going up against the cartels. So Venezuela can either turn a blind eye to what we're doing to these cartel boats and continue to allow their sovereignty to be violated and further allow that to erode later, or they can respond and try and strike back at the United States. But if they do, they are clearly making out a foreign policy picture that Venezuela is in armed support of terrorist organizations and drug cartels within Central and South America, and that gives us the perfect explanation to be able to go in and deal with Maduro. That is exactly what I'm saying.
And surely, And surely Maduro's got to see that. Like, Maduro's not the smartest guy in the world. I think we can all agree on that. But at the same time, though, even a dummy could see this. Like, it's obvious right now that there's so many forces literally just waiting for something to happen around Venezuela so that way the U.S. can attack the Maduro regime. It's literally obvious. It's clear as day what's going on here. We're waiting for the spark in the room to ignite so that way we can actually go in there and take care of Maduro and his cartel. So Maduro knows that. Like, he's got to know it. So him attacking the U.S. first would be a death sentence when it comes to his government, in my personal opinion. The U.S. is going to go in hard on him if he does that. So he's got to wait it out. And that's got to be brutal for someone like Maduro, because right now he's basically helpless. He can't attack the U.S. He also really can't do anything else. Basically, the only thing he can do is flee at this point. And fleeing means giving up right now and basically collapsing the entire government. So he's in a rock and a hard place right now. So the next move by the United States is going to pretty much set the pace.
It really will set the pace, but I would have to be honest with y'all, I do not think that we are going to fire the first shot at Venezuela. We are goading them into firing the first shot at us. That is clearly what I'm seeing at this point from my analysis. I would say usually there's a predictable chance of different paths of action. On this one, I will bet y'all that what we're doing right now, based off of every other historical precedent where something like this has happened, we are pretty much trying to goad them into shooting at us so we can have a proper justification that is defensive instead of offensive. That's generally what I'm seeing at this point. Also, another thing that I see some people saying is, well, how in the world do we get the Venezuelans to fire at us, and also will U.S. soldiers be killed? The chances of them being killed is extremely wildly small. Like, I cannot go out my way to emphasize how small a chance is that any service members could get wounded or killed in this instance, because we have so many vessels that are currently in this area right now that any anti-ship missiles that are fired at a destroyer or a cruiser would be shot down well before they even got close to the cruisers or the destroyers. And on top of that, if any sort of anti-radiation missiles were fired at the MU forces inside of Puerto Rico in the 22nd MU, those would also be shot down as well, quite easily by the F-35s, the Navy, or the MU itself with its ground air defense forces. So really there is no actual threat being posed by a Venezuelan attack against U.S. forces in the area, but if they do fire at us, they're giving us a 100% justification, and nobody's wounded and killed in the process for the larger part. At least that would be the plan. If something went differently, then that would be, of course, a tragic sort of oversight and a misfortune, but that generally appears to be the plan that's being worked with at the moment right now. I also see some other people saying, we didn't violate Venezuelan sovereignty. We did, 100%. The last seizure of the tuna boat that occurred inside of their waters was conducted in their territorial waters. Territorial waters are a country's exclusively. You cannot conduct any sort of armed operation in the territorial waters of another state unless you're in a state of war with them. And so that's why we are saying that we violated their sovereignty. We 100% did by sending in that U.S. away team off the Jason Dunham near to this island, the Isla La Orchila, to be able to seize the tuna boat. It was well within their territorial waters, and we still seized it, which is where we're provoking them. It's a drug boat. That's for sure. Part of a terrorist organization. That is for sure, based off of that result. Because the tuna boat was seized and was confirmed to have drugs on board, so it wasn't part of a terrorist organization, which is a cartel that's operating the area. The nuance, however, is that we did that inside their territorial waters, so that's where the conflict of interest is coming in. We have a legal right to pretty much face down and destroy terrorist forces wherever they may be. That's generally how terrorists are treated. But at the same time, we're violating Venezuela's sovereignty, which is provoking them into some kind of a response. So I hope that's clarifying that a little bit for folks who are saying that we're not provoking them. We 100% are, and we're provoking them to try and get a reaction. Which honestly, as far as trying to start a war, this is actually technically the kind of the way that you would want to do it, because there's really no way anyone in the world can say that a U.S. war with Venezuela, if that's the end goal, is unjustified when Venezuela is technically the first one to fire a shot at us instead of us firing it at them. Anyways, I hope that addresses that the best that we can, at least with how that works on the diplomatic level and the historical level, and that probably is the way that the U.S. government is approaching the situation right now. And also, for the home front, we also have to understand this. Who in the world can sit there and say that a U.S. war with Venezuela is unjustified when Venezuela shot at us first? Yes, we're provoking them right now, But they're the ones who are going to have to make the decision to fire the first shot. And when they fire that first shot, now they're trying to kill U.S. citizens. They're trying to kill our service members on those ships or in the MU that's in Puerto Rico. So then we can sit there and give a justification that we are defending ourselves against this incredibly violent and dangerous regime that's not only incredibly violent and dangerous, but is supporting drug cartel terroristic operations inside of that region of the world. So it gives us a bulletproof, ironclad defense to go down there and fight the Venezuelans, both on the home front and also abroad in places like the United Nations and elsewhere where it really doesn't even count, but it still is good to have some sort of an international justification to these sorts of escalations for the larger part. But with that, I hope that does address that the best that we can, at least in our opinion right now. And we have also been able to hear some additional news. Speaking of continued anti-cartel operations around the Americas, we were actually able to see that the U.S. Coast Guard today, as a part of Operation Pacific Viper off of the Baja Peninsula, actually seized a low-visibility vessel, an LVV, near to the area of the peninsula. From what we understand, this one was actually traveling towards California, and it was caught. This is a little bit rare, actually. Usually these low visibility vessels end up passing by, and there's a great video that was made and a great explanation that was also made on H.I. Sutton's website, Covert Shores, about these low visibility vessels and how they're designed to be able to try and escape detection by the United States Coast Guard or the Navy, and to be able to smuggle drugs and illicit sorts of cargoes into the United States of America. But we can actually see the Coast Guard here stopping one of these vessels, detaining the crew, and seizing the vessel. Now, it's crazy.
Shouting louder works better.
Put the gun down! Honestly, but also, one thing I gotta say is that these low visibility vessels are truly low visibility. These things are actually made out of normal boats, but what they do is that they cut them down to the waterline, the literal waterline of the boat, so there is practically no room inside these things. Then they laden them down with loads of drugs or other types of illegal cargoes, which makes the waterline settle even farther down into the water, and then they have an incredibly small little sail, if you want to call it that sticks up above the main deck, and then they also have a large amount of outboard motors on the back of the vessel to be able to get it a great deal of speed. The tactic behind these sorts of low visibility vessels is that they are so flush with the waterline, nobody is really ever able to see them. They're also usually painted an incredibly neutral color, like for example with this one, gray or some sort of a sky blue, so that way they'll blend in with the sea state a little bit better at any given moment. The only thing that really gives them away is the wake that they make due to their high speed, but that also can usually be it usually can be mistaken for just the crest of a wave or the foam off of a wave in rougher sea states, which also helps for this vessel to largely remain concealed. So capturing these things and stopping them is incredibly difficult. And also, it's a bit of a misnomer that the cartel, that these are narco subs, because they're technically not submersible or even semi-submersible. Once these things take on water, they go down pretty quickly. We understand that a lot of people die operating these because they're incredibly dangerous. Yeah. But they aren't technically submarines. The cartel does have submarines, and practically none of those have ever been captured because they're pretty much impervious to any sort of detection normally. But these low visibility vessels are the ones that usually are caught the most.
Yeah, you know, these affiliates right here are cartel affiliates, or whatever you want to call them, mules or whatever. These people drown all the time in these things. These things are like death traps, basically. And you see those massive outboards in the back. These things are designed for high speed. So you can only imagine with something so low profile to the water like that, and obviously it's in the ocean, so it's obviously some big waves out here occasionally. These things have like little breathing tubes that like put air into the actual cabin of this thing. And once this thing hits a wave or something, that water immediately goes down into those breathing tubes and starts filling up the whole like interior of this thing. So drowning is extremely common in these things right here. It's very, very common.
Oh, yeah. And also notice, folks, when they're getting close, this is one way that you can always tell in Central and South America that a boat is involved in illegal operations. Whenever they have a large amount of the highest powered outboard motors, you can guarantee that any boat with a configuration like that, even one that's not a low visibility vessel like this, they are guaranteed to be involved in cartel operations. The kind of median incomes that you usually see in most Central American countries, Mexico now excluded because their median income is actually rising a pretty decent bit due to U.S. manufacturing now showing up in Mexico in larger numbers. But usually in most Central and South American countries, people do not have the kind of money to go out and buy the finest and most powerful outboard motors and scores of them to put onto a single inexpensive boat. It's generally always an indicative sign of some sort of cartel or illicit illegal operations, because these things are not cheap. Like let me go show you all this. For example, like the median income of, say, Colombia, and let's see, Colombia, $28,000 and for a household, that's about $55,000. It's actually a lot more than I thought it would be. But still, beyond that, for a single individual, which, let's just assume, for example, a single individual in Colombia is trying to get a fishing boat off the ground, it would take his entire yearly salary, with no taxes included, to buy 3 outboard motors like that. So, fairly unlikely that that would be the case for most people living inside of a country like that. But nevertheless, here's the clip. You can actually see those little ventilators that Matthew was talking about there a minute ago, right there on that hatch. We now see them pulling them out, and we can see some illegal exposure right there. It was luckily blurred out.
Also notice the hatch on top is not really secured. It's just sort of like loosely sitting there. And also you can see how wide those intake holes are. They were facing away from the waves, but the problem is when waves start cresting over this low profile vessel, that water goes right back down into those tubes. So it's basically a water pipe that just lets water straight down into the thing. So you can imagine the sloshing that's probably going on the side of that thing is probably tremendous.
I would have to say so. Also, by the way, folks, I spelled Colombia properly the first time, second-guessed myself, and then respelled it to Colombia with a U. I actually just typed up Colombia, and actually the median income in these countries is about $1,400 a month, which would mean that they're getting about $18,000 a year or less as a single individual, and about $32,000 to $34,000 as a household, not including deductions for taxes or, tax earnings that they have to be given to the government of Colombia. So that makes it even worse. It would take about a several years worth of salary to get this many outboard motors of this type that are this expensive on a boat, or any boat for that matter, inside of Central America or South America. So once again, to give you all a little bit of an idea, if you see a large amount of outboard motors on the boat, highly likely involved in illegal activities. You see him with the Glock here. They got the piece. But that was the end of the clip, and it does appear that it was a successful seizure of another low-visibility vessel near to the area of California. Moving on out of all of the news from the Caribbean and moving us on over into some other significant news inside of Ukraine, we were able to hear today that the armed forces of Ukraine have launched a massive and significant offensive near to the area of the Dobropillia direction. Dobropillia ended up becoming the northern flank of the Pokrovsk battlefield, and at this point, the Pokrovsk battlefield is broken up into pretty much 3 distinct flanks. We have the northern flank, which is the Dobropillia axis. We have the Pokrovsk flank, which is the center. And then in the south, we have the Odachny, or largely Novopavlivka flank, which is the southern flank of the battlefield. All 3 of these together are incredibly important, and the Russian Federation has made the most significant advances on the Dobropillia and Novopavlivka directions, generally making ground and attempting an encirclement of the city, or at least an attempt to cut off the city's major highways that supply and reinforce the Ukrainian forces holding the city that had been holding it effectively for nearly a year. This is actually something that was interestingly enough pointed out by someone on Reddit. This is a comparison on Deep State of the frontline situation at Pokrovsk 10 months ago, and also the frontline situation as of 10 months later, which was just recently. This is how much ground the Russians have made, and on the southern axis, they have made practically none. They still hold Shevchenko, but they have hardly advanced any further than there. They've literally advanced maybe several hundred yards out of Shevchenko further north towards Pokrovsk, and it made absolutely no ground at Lysivka. The Ukrainians still strongly hold Pokrovsk and Mirnorad, which are the larger settlements within this area, but the Russian forces did make some gains, at least within the northern front near Dobropillia, recently. This is the most maneuverable and active flank at the moment on the Pokrovsk battlefield, and it did appear that for a while the Russian Federation may have been able to manage a breakthrough. As we all remember, the Dobropillia breakthrough, where the Russian Federation was able to advance about 18 kilometers over the course of 2 days. The Ukrainians then brought in the 1st National Guard Corps and completely crushed the battalion that conducted that action, and pretty much destroyed them in detail not long after. After that, we were able to hear today that there has been a large number of encirclements that have happened within this region, at least according to Colonel Valentin Manko, who is the head of the Ukrainian Assault Troops Command, which stated that Russian forces near Dobropillia have been cut off for 3 weeks. 3 encirclements have been formed as a result of today's actions, including the small one that's at Kucherov Yar, a medium one around Volodymyrivka, and a large one that has been previously unreported, but was reported for the first time by Colonel Valentin Manko around the area of the Rezine-Rodinsky line. We are also hearing that this is what the current front line looks like in the northern flank of Pokrovsk near Dobropillia at the moment. And this is something that is actually confirming some frontline analysis and developments that we made on the channel a while ago, but we weren't really able to confirm a great deal, at least with frontline updates, which is the fact that the Ukrainians did conduct an effective encirclement of those 7 Russian brigades that were within this area about a week and a half to 2 weeks ago. Many of y'all will remember that we talked about that, and we talked about how Ukrainian forces like the 425th Assault Regiment had made advances towards to the area of Shevchenko-Perche and were clearly behind the Russians' front lines, at least within that area, and were breaking through their rear lines and going up against rearguard personnel and troops that they were starting to take prisoner. Over the past several days, it appears that a more fleshed out frontline picture has started to emerge, and it's become incredibly clear that the Russian positions between Novoshikovye and Shakove have become quite literally untenable and are completely encircled at this moment. The lost battalion is still being reported as existent, although we were able to report that it appears that the lost battalion was completely destroyed and shattered, and we were able to hear of some attempting breakouts back towards the Russian main lines, and then they, of course, were forced to walk through minefields after they returned, and they were claimed to be cowards. It also appears on top of that near to the Volodymyrivka direction and the Shakove village direction, the Ukrainian armed forces like the 425th and the 73rd Brigade were able to largely meet up closely enough to the middle of the rear line and were able to create that effective encirclement that we were talking about that week and a half ago. And this means that Russian brigades have been flooding out of this area back eastwards to try and escape this effective encirclement, and the Russian northern flank at Dobropillia has largely been collapsing on this battlefield since about a week and a half ago. Based off of this, we are assuming that the Ukrainian armed forces will be able to take hundreds of prisoners, most likely about a battalion level element in total from all the forces that are currently encircled, and we are also assuming that the Russian northern flank will remain poorly organized and poorly coordinated for some time, as they're having to reaffirm their defensive lines in this area in new directions after a retreat from this Ukrainian offensive. In short, it's been wildly successful, and this practically is resetting the Pokrovsk battlefield to what it looked like exactly 10 months ago, literally putting the Russians back to square one on what the Battle of Pokrovsk is even looking like at all. So this is a major success for the Ukrainian armed forces, and it also is showing us that the Russian Federation's armed forces are in fairly difficult stretches. The Russians did not have a lack of manpower in that area. They had around 7 full regiments within that area, which is about 35,000 to 40,000 men within that flank. Even with 40,000 men in that one particular focalized direction, they were not able to hold the front line, and a smaller amount of Ukrainian armed forces were not able to hold the line defensively. They also counterattacked and were able to push these 7 Russian brigades back towards to the area of the village of Novopoltovka, which is pretty much where they're going to have to reset their front line and then try and begin again at another attempted pincer maneuver north of the city of Pokrovsk. We also were able to hear that counteroffensives were underway earlier in the day by President Volodymyr Zelenskyy, which is his speech for the day. We'll be covering that far later on in the show, and we also were able to get further confirmation of this counterattack, as well as Zelenskyy actually already awarding some soldiers that had been involved in the counteroffensive for their bravery and heroism on the battlefield in the midst of the counteroffensive that has been ongoing for about a week and a half and is going into full force as of today, at least according to Zelenskyy. It does also appear that a lot of people, before we show this clip, are actually talking about the Ukrainian reports from the Pokrovsk front, which are incredibly positive and are pretty much showing that a large element of Russian forces have been encircled within this area, and other Russian brigades and regiments are now retreating from that front, practically with their tails tucked between their legs. Matthew, what are people thinking about that current situation, and what are you thinking about it as well?
So yeah, Vladimir Putin's effort to quickly gain some ground to go to the Alaska meeting with the U.S. president a short while back has backfired tremendously, because now the Ukrainians are reporting, like the enforcer just mentioned, that those forces in Pokrovsk, near the Pokrovsk finger, that offensive into Ukrainian territory, those soldiers are now encircled. So what are your thoughts about that? It looks like 71% said Russia have officially abandoned their men, and those guys are basically up for grabs by the Ukrainians, while 10% said that Russia will still fight their way out of that area, and 9% said that Ukraine will probably struggle to take those guys, and it'll probably be a long fight. So the way I see it right now is it sounds like Russia has sort of realized they're going to get defeated here in this area near Pokrovsk, and basically they've abandoned their men. And that is very Russian in their style, to just leave those guys behind. It was a strategic bad maneuver to do what they did there with that offensive. They found that out later, and now their way to compensate for it is to just leave those guys hanging. And the Ukrainians are either going to have to take those guys prisoner, or they're going to have to fight it out, one or the other. So I'm with the 72%. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would generally have to be with the 72%. The Russians have practically abandoned them. We already saw that the Lost Battalion was abandoned quite a while ago and has been lost forever, rest in pieces, and it doesn't really appear that any other of the Lost Battalions that are now forming as of today will ever be recovered. Every single Russian breakthrough attempt to try and relieve the Lost Battalion and help them to retreat was completely a failure, and we would assume that any other attempts at relieving Lost Battalions will also be failures and generally result in even higher casualties for the Russian Federation's armed forces, and no relief of the encircled forces that the Russians are now seeing around Volodymyr and other encirclements that are occurring within that area. On top of that, really the only people who are going to survive this whole ordeal and at least continue their employment with the Russian army will be the ones that are a part of the main elements of the brigades that are currently retreating further eastwards and towards Novopoltavka. Those are really the only forces that we expect that will continue to fight on, and everyone else is either going to get encircled, killed, or surrender. And that's pretty much the result of the northern axis of this front line, at least at the moment. Moving on out of Ukraine, we'll cover all of the rest of the frontline news there later, and on into some very interesting news out of the area of Afghanistan. We were actually able to hear that the United States of America is apparently trying to go and reclaim the Bagram Air Base just outside of Kabul. According to the President of the United States in a statement made in the United Kingdom today, he stated that the United States is trying to reclaim Bagram Air Base in Afghanistan, claiming that China now controls it, and also that is a claim that Afghan authorities deny, which doesn't really mean anything. The president also criticized the previous administration for handing it over, highlighting the base's strategic importance near Chinese nuclear facilities. One thing that was said by the president today is that Bagram is in an incredibly prime location, which no one can really disagree with. It is about an hour away from western China, the far west of China. It is able to project power throughout the entirety of Central Asia, and not only that, it allows for U.S. forces to be able to base and operate on Iran's eastern borders, which is something that we currently are not capable of right now, unless we get permission by the Pakistanis to operate over their airspace, and even still, that would be incredibly limited in its positive results, and most U.S. air operations would have to be conducted by carrier and pretty much fly directly along the very eastern border inside of Iran, through Iran, to reach any sorts of targets, meaning that they would be within enemy airspace during the entire time of an air operation, unlike a situation in Afghanistan, where those air forces would technically be in generally air superiority achieved skies, which would not pose a great deal of threat of ground fire or any other sorts of actions, and allow for those aircraft to be able to base and stage properly before conducting their air activities. This is something that a lot of people have been hearing about today, and was a major topic of discussion inside the United Kingdom by the President of the United States, and it does appear that a lot of people have been talking about what the United States is planning on doing in terms of retaking Bagram. A lot of people have talked about it, and there are a couple of different ideas that have been come up with so far. It seems like one of the most likely ideas, at least for today, is that the United States is attempting to negotiate with the Taliban to regain access to the airbase. Another highly unlikely option is that the United States is going to be invading Afghanistan to retake Bagram, which is highly unlikely at this point. And then a third option is that we are going to invade Afghanistan, only take Bagram and nothing else, and then just secure it and hold it indefinitely. So we're not really sure which one it would be, or if it would be any of them at all, but this is a interesting sort of a development nonetheless. I would also like to lay out to y'all that Bagram is actually not an American constructed airbase, at least originally. This was actually a Soviet airbase from the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan in 1979 to 1989. This is actually where a large part of the Soviet armed forces were operating their aircraft and also helicopters within this area of Afghanistan. When the Soviets left Afghanistan, they abandoned Bagram Air Base, and it fell under the control of the Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan, which generally took control of the air base in 1995, about 6 years after the end of the Soviet-Afghan War, after the Northern Alliance, which is what the Taliban generally is, was able to defeat all of the other mujahideen and terrorist forces within the country. And then the United States invaded in 2001. We came back into Bagram. Well, we were never there originally. We came into Bagram when, hey, the Soviets actually had a pretty good idea with this. And then we just developed it even farther, greatly improved it, of course, westernized it to a great degree. And then we started to operate it from 2001 to 2021 when we left the country, and then the Afghan government, or the Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan, collapsed, and the Islamic Caliphate of Afghanistan came into being, which is what currently exists in the country today. You can actually see, if I can get you all a picture here, the old Soviet air traffic control tower that actually exists here at Bagram and is still there to this day.
That's a nasty looking, looks like a hunting shack or something, like a hunting blind or tower or something like that. Doesn't even look like air traffic control.
No, the Soviets Sovietified this thing when they built it the first time. It was pretty rough. Let me go see if I can pull this up for y'all for like a little bit of a rabbit hole. Soviet Bagram. Let's see here. Let me see if I can get y'all some pictures of that. Oh, let's see here. The old Soviet Bagram. Actually, yeah, here you go. This is a then and now picture of an Su-25 of the Soviet Air Force at Bagram, and then an A-10 Warthog at the exact same pad at Bagram about 30 years later.
That's crazy right there. I gotta say that A-10 goes hard, though. I gotta admit.
Yeah, it does go hard. Here's some MiG-21s that are also based there. Fairly interesting enough, folks. The Soviets ran into some issues. If y'all don't know the full history of the Russian and American involvement in Afghanistan, it actually goes pretty deep. You see, the Soviets were actually going off on the Afghans in the early years of their invasion, and were pretty much conducting genocides throughout most of the country. They were wiping out villages, killing thousands of people. Whenever there was any resistance, they would treat it like it was a conventional force firing at them. They'd literally just level a whole village and kill everyone in it. So the Mujahideen really didn't have an effective way to fight the Soviets, because the Soviets also started to evolve their tactics to where they mostly used helicopters. So a guy named Charlie Wilson here in the United States, who I believe was a member of the Congress, actually started to lobby generally for the idea that the U.S. would provide armed support to Afghanistan using Pakistan as an intermediary, and primarily we would provide to the Mujahideen, which later turned into the Taliban, AIM-92 Stingers, which are these little things right here. Let me go get y'all a picture of one. Ah, here we are. It's this thing right here. These are what's called man-portable air defense, and they're incredibly short range. They are only effective for a few miles. The missiles are not incredibly maneuverable. This is generally made to engage and shoot down enemy helicopters. You can shoot down cruise missiles and aircraft with these, but that's an incredibly tall order and pretty hard to do. But beyond that, we started to provide a load of these to the Mujahideen, primarily, and they started to shoot down Soviet helicopters, which completely removed the ability of the Soviet Union to airlift support around the country by helicopter and to also engage the Taliban by helicopter due to the threat that was being posed by the Stingers. This started to make the Soviet position in Afghanistan untenable, and due to them having to resort back to ground convoys to provide reinforcements and support to their far-flung forces throughout the entirety of the hard-to-reach regions of Afghanistan, they started to take significant losses, the war started to cost a lot more due to those losses, and that's what eventually led to the Soviet Union leaving Afghanistan around 1989. And it's actually said that the fall of the Soviet Union, in a small part, was actually because of the incredibly expensive and significant failure that the Soviet Union faced inside of Afghanistan. But that's a whole other rabbit hole. Like, that's just an interesting point of history. But later on, those people, the little Mujahideen people that we gave the singers to, when the Soviets left, they would all end up teaming together. Most of them were within northern Afghanistan when a new civil war emerged right after the Soviets left between all of these different tribes and groups of Afghanistan, and they would create what was called the Northern Alliance. Through the next 6 years, all of these tribes under the Northern Alliance and the different groups in Afghanistan would wage war. And in 1995, the Northern Alliance, now the Taliban, came out on top and created the Islamic Emirate of, well, actually, I believe it's the Islamic Caliphate of Afghanistan, if I'm not mistaken, which was the country that existed that harbored Osama bin Laden after the 9/11 attacks, which is what we use as a justification to invade Afghanistan and then end up there for about 20 straight years. Just to give you all the full history of events as to what was even going on there, why we were there, and why in the world we even ended up at Bagram, or why the Soviets were at Bagram and why they left. It's a whole deal. But beyond that, a lot of people have been talking about the United States and their stated discussions today about possibly trying to find a way to re-enter Bagram. And Matthew, what are people thinking about that, and what are you thinking about that as well?
All right, so talking about a sidewinder, this is certainly a sidewinder right here. I was not expecting to hear this today. And also, if y'all got to see the video of the British Prime Minister hearing the reaction to that statement today, he looked shocked as I did when I heard it. So what is the United States planning on here when they say they're trying to reclaim the Bagram Air Base? It looks like 47% said the U.S. will negotiate a deal to get the base back, while 29% said it's just rambling and meaningless, and 16% said the U.S. will threaten invasion of Afghanistan to get it back from the Taliban. So it's a mess. Let's just say that. It was a bad idea to give up Bagram in the first place because it's literally very close to China, or getting close to their sphere of influence there. So it's rumored that maybe some Chinese agents are operating on the territory of Bagram. That has not been confirmed, but of course the Chinese are very close to Bagram, and it might be within their interest to do that and work with the Taliban to get access to that base. So that's a concern, and some people are speculating that that might be the reason why all of a sudden the U.S. is so interested in Bagram again, is because they might have gotten confirmation that the Chinese are there. That could be the case. But I believe the U.S. is trying to negotiate a deal for right now. I don't think an invasion of Afghanistan is really on the table right now. That would be wildly in-depth to do that. That would be a huge undertaking. That would not be anything to take lightly. So I really doubt that's going to be the case. But just to make this clear, folks, I want to make this very clear right now. There's a lot of misinformation about the Afghanistan situation. Back in 2020, the Doha Agreement was signed, which basically said we were going to get all of our forces out of Afghanistan as the United States, and we're going to leave the country. That's what it said. And y'all know who was in charge in 2020. Don't have to say his name. Y'all know who that is. Then later on down the road, the next president came in charge, and he pulled us out of Afghanistan extremely quickly and made some, in my opinion, some poor choices about how we pulled out, and it cost the lives of 13 service members. So that became known as the Afghanistan disaster, basically, pulling out of there the way we did. It wasn't necessarily the pullout that was the problem. It was the way we pulled out. And that's what went wrong, basically. So that's why Afghanistan has a lot of stigma around it when it comes to that whole situation with the U.S. leaving, is because of that situation right there. So it's just tricky. We don't need to go back to Afghanistan, though. Like, we do not need to do that. We gave up Bagram. We made that choice. And if we can somehow negotiate to get it back, that'd be great. But I really doubt that's going to happen because the Taliban are probably in deep with the Chinese, I'd imagine. But Enforcer, what say you?
Also, a clarification. Lord Cog was correct. He was the first one to point this out. I actually misquoted. The Northern Alliance was the opposition against the Taliban. The Taliban was actually the force fighting the Northern Alliance, and the Northern Alliance was against the Taliban. So, wanted to make a correction there on that because I misquoted that part of the history a little bit earlier. But beyond that, I would have to say that this situation is one that's a little bit weird, and I touched on it in the video earlier today, and I'm going to touch on it again a little bit, in a sense, at this point. The U.S. left Afghanistan because we, one, thought it was no longer politically viable to be in Afghanistan. Generally, everyone was in agreement on that, and a lot of people have been talking for years about leaving Afghanistan up till that point. Two, the the current people who are in charge right now were the ones who actually signed the Doha Agreement, or as it's called, the United States-Taliban deal, which was signed in Doha, Qatar in 2020. And that deal laid out, just to give you all the specific provisions, that as long as the Taliban, which technically is the Mujahideen and all other factions inside of Afghanistan, didn't attack NATO forces, as it was a NATO operation going on in Afghanistan, up until May 1st of 2021, all NATO forces, including the United States, would conduct a complete withdrawal, with that rounding out on the 1st of May of 2021. That deal was signed. And so at that point, also, by the way, there's a little bit of a nuance with that. This is one of the few times the UN ever came into play. All permanent security partners, France, Britain, the United States, Russia, and China, all ratified this. Everyone was in agreement. So this was one of the few times that a UN treaty was actually ratified by the United Nations and actually technically became international law. So we got to throw that caveat in, because this will end up tying the hands of U.S. administration leadership later on with what we could do. So now we have a binding treaty by international law, ratified by the United Nations, ratified by all Security Council members, the permanent ones, and also on top of that, we also had an agreement with the Taliban that we would be gone completely by 2021. And that was the agreement made in 2020. So before anyone says that we planned on staying in Bagram forever, we didn't. We had already planned that we were leaving Afghanistan completely by that point. Then 2021 came around, and the new leadership in the country at the time actually expanded the deadline for us to leave, and then stated that they wanted to plan on the last U.S. forces leaving Afghanistan on September 11th of 2021 for symbolic purposes, since that would be the 20th year and to the day of the 9/11 attacks. After the 1st of May, the Taliban and the Mujahideen started new offensive operations against the Emirate of Afghanistan's government, which is the government that we supported inside of the country, and the Emirate of Afghanistan started to collapse rapidly, far faster than anyone had calculated or war-gamed out. It was believed that the Afghan government would have been able to survive for around 6 months once Afghan offensives began, Taliban offensives began, which were believed were guaranteed going to begin after the 1st of May, which technically wasn't supposed to be an issue because U.S. forces were supposed to be completely gone out of the country by that time, by the 1st of May. However, the deadline had been extended, and we were now leaving on the 11th of September. The last forces were going to leave that day of that year. So the Afghan government was collapsing around us. U.S. forces were still there, and we actually did some research before this, and I also did some digging as well during the countdown. It turns out that a decision was made by the leadership at that time, because Bagram was going to be the last air base that was going to be held under the original plan from the United States-Taliban deal. They actually changed that last minute, and actually, Matthew, I did look into this, and you were correct on this. They moved all the U.S. security forces out of Bagram Air Base and down to the U.S. Embassy and Consulate in Kabul in the green zone near to the Kabul International Airport. And this would end up being... Bad choice. This actually would end up being a fatal disaster for the U.S. forces and the remaining NATO forces that were inside of the country. Bagram Air Base is geographically isolated and is not inside of an urban area. It's about 20 miles outside of Kabul. And this means that anyone trying to leave the country would have to somehow make the arduous venture through the desert from Kabul up to Bagram. That is where the problem started to lie, is that sort of a barrier no longer existed when all remaining U.S. forces, which was about a battalion element in strength, then moved into the green zone, which is around the Kabul International Airport, somewhere around here, and started to prepare to move out the remainder of the U.S. consulate and those Afghans who had supported the United States mission inside of Afghanistan and get them out of there. That's when all chaos ensued. Everyone knows the chaos that followed with that. 7 U.S. service members ended up losing their lives in checkpoint bombings that happened around the airport.
Routine, actually.
Yeah, it was actually fairly routine. And then after a while, it turns out that there were so few U.S. forces and there was such a large mob of people trying to flee the country that weren't even aligned with the United States but didn't want to live under Taliban rule, that were trying to escape, that the security forces couldn't even hold the perimeter, and then they were given the orders to just let everyone in. All hell broke loose at that point. People were literally crowding the runways to tarmacs. Aircraft couldn't even maneuver. People were hanging onto the aircraft that were falling off when they were flying away. It was a disaster. Everyone knows how that went. It was an absolute unmitigated disaster. And then even still...
The problem was this. Here's why it was such a bad idea to leave Bagram, because they left Bagram early to consolidate at Kabul International Airport. That was a mistake, because what they did was they left a very secure fortified area. Bagram was very secure. It had a nice perimeter around it, and it had a bunch of alarms it would trigger if someone tried to breach the perimeter. So it was well protected, and you didn't need as many soldiers to protect Bagram as you would at Kabul International Airport. The problem with Kabul is you go to that airport, and it has a very, very lackluster perimeter, if any perimeter at all. So you have to have a lot of forces to secure that perimeter. We didn't have those forces there. I think it was like 2,500. I think it was actually less than 2,500 troops over there. I can't remember the exact number, but they went there, which is a very unsecure facility, and then they expected the Marines that were left to try to hoard off all these people trying to go to the airport that were, and also Taliban were mixing in with these people. You couldn't tell who was Taliban and you couldn't tell who was a civilian. So these individuals planned an attack, and they took out 13 of our guys, 13 Marines, which were generally around 20 years old, each one of them. They were generally very young Marines. They got taken out. So, which obviously that was a horrible tragedy right there. And it could have been prevented if we just simply had a secure perimeter. In my opinion, that was the big fatal flaw right there. We should not have abandoned Bagram when we did. We should have kept it there. We should have consolidated at Bagram instead of consolidating at the Kabul airport. That's where it all went wrong. And obviously, we see that there are literally people falling off the aircraft that were taking off at the international airport because they literally couldn't control the perimeter that much. The civilians were falling off the planes as they were taking off.
And I would have to agree for the large part. It wasn't really managed well at all. But beyond that, a lot of people were speaking about whether or not the U.S. is going to invade Afghanistan to take back Bagram. I think we're most likely going to be getting into some sort of a negotiation and see if the Taliban would be welcoming us back and if we could somehow pay them or compensate them for pretty much leasing out the Bagram Air Base so that way we can use it. I don't know how in the world that would go. I have a feeling that's not going to go too well, but we'll have to wait and see what U.S. negotiating teams are ever able to announce, if they announce anything at all. So moving on from that and out of Afghanistan, out of that sort of a wild development today, we are going to be moving on into the rest of the news that we have for the night, which is still quite a large amount. But before we get into all of that news, I do want to make sure that we get into a couple of questions that we've gotten over the course of the night. So, Matthew, what do we got?
All right, so jumping into our first 3 super chats of the night. Our first one goes to Little Bear, and thank you very much, Little Bear, for that $50 support right there, and we do appreciate that very, very much. And Little Bear said, I am happy for the hard-earned success you've had, but sad that I'm still listening to the struggle for Ukraine 3 years later. And take a question from the chat, please.
Hey, and thank you so much for the massive support, Little Bear, and helping the channel to keep rolling. And I got to say that I thank you so much for being happy for our hard-earned success. It is a little bit unfortunate, the war that is still going on 3.5 years later, almost 4 years later, really, in a little while from now, which is about 5 months. It'll have been a whole 4 years that the war's been going on in full, and we'll be entering the 5th year of the war, which is really insane to think about. But beyond that, I would have to say that it's a bit of a bittersweet thing, because it's better that the war has been going on this long than not, because the only way that this war would have ended is if Ukraine was defeated at this point, because the Russians would have never given up, like we're seeing now in hindsight, until they had won. So if the war had ended at any point earlier than now, the Russians would have certainly won, and still 3.5 years later, the Ukrainians are still hanging on, they're still fighting the Russians, and a lot of top U.S. advisors, including us here on the channel, as far as our analysis goes, are saying that the Russians are going to be losing this war in the end, one way or another. And so I hope that does address it the best I can, at least in my opinion, to look at it in a bit of a more optimistic way. But it's still a massive thanks to you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep on running, because it is folks like you who help to make this channel possible and help us to keep this thing rolling day in and day out. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and that live chat question in honor of Little Bear is going to go to none other than AF Kaplan. He said, regarding the AFU offensive, how long do you think they will have favorable weather before the rains start again in Ukraine?
I would say that they're going to have about until the midpoint of October, where the ground conditions and weather conditions are favorable. So they actually have a decent amount of an offensive window to work with. And considering that modern offensives for the Ukrainians only last several weeks, this is more than enough time to wrap up the offensive and even still have a decent amount of gap in between then before the bad weather sets in. As a matter of fact, this is actually a very good time strategically for them to conduct this action, because the counteroffensive is already successful, at least to this point, will get further ground over these next few weeks. And then by the time that they stop the offensive and start to solidify defensive lines, the Rasputitsa season is going to be coming around, and then Russian counterattacks are going to be incredibly difficult to pull off. And then the winter months, due to the cold, are going to greatly slow down military activities, and pretty much the Ukrainians will be able to heavily solidify that area and then hold it well on into the next year and probably through that next summer. So I hope that does address that well, at least in my opinion. But as far as the timing on this one, this is actually the prime time for the Ukrainians to have conducted this counteroffensive at the moment. So a huge thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that incredibly well. And with that, we are on to the last question of this segment, and then we're going to be moving on into the rest of the news.
All right, so this one goes to Margaret Hemsley, who puts in a $31 donation, and thank you very much, Margaret, as well, for that support. And she said, I'm always listening, and always liking, and always sharing, and I just don't get to talk much or give much these days, and I consider you as friends. And also likewise, Margaret, and thank you very much. And Margaret said, take a live chat question, please.
Thank you so much for the support, Margaret. We consider you a friend as well. You've been around for an incredibly long time, and I gotta say that I thank you for still watching, still posting, still sharing, because we are always happy to know that the folks we don't hear from a lot are still around and still watching. It's just that we don't get to hear from y'all as much, which is sad, but still great to know that y'all are around and check in from time to time. And I gotta thank you massively for the support and helping this channel to keep on running, because it is through the support from the viewers themselves that we are able to keep this channel running and make this thing possible day in and day out, year over year, week over week, month over month. And I got to thank you massively for being one of those folks who's been with us pretty much since the beginning as we've been covering this news and has watched every single major world news event through the lens of the Enforcer channel. So a massive thanks to you so much once again. And we will make sure to get a question from the live chat in your honor. So Matthew, what do we got?
And this live chat question goes to Lee and Kate, who said, if the U.S. goes to war with Venezuela, will neighboring countries join due to the fact that Venezuela has hit every neighbor at some stage in the last 10 years?
I would definitely say that Guyana would join in support of the United States, but not in any direct armed way, as Guyana's armed forces is incredibly small and largely incompetent. They would allow themselves to be used as a basing area or a security perimeter to stop the Venezuelans from fleeing in their direction. As far as Colombia is concerned, I really don't know what their reaction would be. We're not hearing a lot out of them at the moment, so they're a bit of a blank slate. We don't really know what they're thinking or what they're saying about this right now. But we will have to see one day what they're saying or what's going to be coming out of them eventually. But nevertheless, what I would generally have to say about the Venezuelan situation is that if the United States kicks off a war with them, most everyone's going to stay out of it because not really a lot of people have much to gain by getting directly involved. The U.S. will pretty much take care of everything for them as far as they're concerned with the Maduro regime, even without them having to fire a shot. So I would generally expect that nobody's going to be joining the war in support of Venezuela or against Venezuela, generally because the United States is involved, and usually a lot of people like to back off and have very minimal involvement whenever the United States gets involved anywhere. So with that, I hope that does address that the best I can, at least in my opinion. And a big thanks to you once again for sponsoring the live chat, Margaret Hemsley, and helping this channel to keep on rolling. Because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't have been able to make this channel possible, and we wouldn't have been able to keep it running all the way up until this day. And so with that, folks, it's time for us to get on into the rest of the news that we have for tonight. And we still have a very large amount. We were able to hear around the area of Petropavlovsk, Kamchatsky, another magnitude 7.8 earthquake has hit the Kamchatsky Peninsula. Oh, look at that. That whole thing's rocking and shaking, baby.
When that van's a rocking, don't come and knock it. You know, it's weird that every single time when these earthquakes happen, these massive, like almost magnitude 8 earthquakes, it seems like the epicenter is like inching closer and closer to the Russian subpen that's literally right there on the Kamchatka Peninsula. It's literally getting closer and closer every single time. It's like, you know, I obviously don't believe in conspiracy theories, but it's kind of odd that it's like literally creeping closer to such an important strategic Russian base.
I'll tell you something, the government's making an earthquake bomb. But it is interesting, I would have to say, folks, that we are seeing massive earthquakes. I mean, they are absolutely huge. And each one is getting closer and closer to Vilkovo. Don't know what's up with that, a little bit odd, but can we complain? No. No, that's a very key sub base, folks. Look at all the subs that were there. When the satellite picture was taken, there was a lot of them there, actually. Several of them, as a matter of fact. It's good to know that these earthquakes keep hitting in this area. We can't complain. Who in the world would complain about that? Not me. Not me. So
It's like, if you ask somebody the question that didn't know anything about this and said, would you find it suspicious at all that 3 mega earthquakes happened literally in the same spot right next to a highly strategic Russian nuclear submarine base? They would say, well, that would be a little suspicious. So I'm like, it is what it is. It's just a happy coincidence, I guess you could say. It's happening right next to this place. But also, it's like Kamchatka has been taking a thrashing. Like, that place has been just getting hit left and right. I think they even had a tsunami warning at one point, too, today.
yeah, they did actually. And also, something I was just noticing, Matthew, is very nice air defense radars right here that are in this permanent position that are technically mobile, but they're just sitting there. It'd be a shame, if an earthquake, damaged them to any extent. And also the air defense launchers, which are literally sitting right here. Isn't it kind of crazy, folks, how you can see all this on satellite? Like, none of this is censored at all by Google. You can just look straight at it. I mean, there are the air defense launchers that have the missiles. And there are the acquisition radars right there. There's actually 2 of them, one right here and one up there. And that's the whole air defense system for this base.
Yeah, it seems a little interesting. I never forgot damaged at all by the shaking.
I doubt it. I bet you the crews were bouncing around in that thing like it was a rave for a little bit, but I'm sure they're fine now. Also, another thing that's kind of a little interesting, folks, about those S-400s, because that's probably what they have there, is they're fairly limited in their capabilities. I mean, at that one base, just to explain this, they only have 8 missiles that are available to fire right now. Because if you look at the satellite picture, and we were to take this as today's picture of what's going on here, they have 3 launchers here, but only 2 of them are set up and ready to fire. That means if you attack this base right now, hypothetically speaking, they only have 8 air defense missiles to work with, and then after that, they're out. They have to get this launcher online, which would take a few minutes, but by then the attack is most likely concluded by the time they picked it up on radar. So, a little bit interesting with that. The more you know. You know what they say? The fruits of knowledge, the fruits of labor, all that sort of a deal. The citizen exists as an apparatus of the state. All that sort of commie vibe stuff. The important things to note here with the air defense. Maybe the apparatus of the state isn't really protecting the citizens too well, like the Russian welfare state loves to say that they do. It's a little interesting with that. But anyways, moving on out of the Kamchatka Peninsula, or the Kamchatsky Peninsula, whichever way you want to call it, we are going to be moving on further down to North Korea, aka the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, as we were able to see a little bit of information coming out of the country today that they were testing their rip-off Global Hawk. Also...
Man, I tell you what, they're trying to up China one. That is like such a replica of the Global Hawk. I almost thought it was one when I looked up for a second. I was like, what the hell is a Global Hawk doing in North Korea? It literally looks like the same thing. And also, what is Kim Jong-un wearing? Like the cosplay for a Western, like mini film or something? What is he doing?
He's trying to be a noir detective now from Chicago in the 1930s. He's gonna come in with like a Chicago accent. What's going on in here? Some stuff like that. It's like, what?
I'll tell you what, that's Sherlock Holmes right there. He's trying to figure out how they got a Global Hawk on their runway. He's like, how'd this get here? Oh, we copied it, sir. Good job for you. Good job.
Also, I like the gentle labor with the little goofy rascal's hat, like sitting here with the bow thing right next to him. It's like, bro, this is going to be a goofier looking scene. Also, look at all the abandoned industrial buildings behind the Global Hawk back there. You clearly can tell they're all abandoned. This thing's like in the ghetto, practically. Like, they got this thing rolling around in Detroit out here in North Korea. But also, they had a load of these things in pictures. Like, there it is taking off. Also, this back view of Kim Jong-un is not a good one, especially with that wide-brimmed hat. I don't know what's going on here, but that's sus looking. We're gonna get
like a woman sitting there or something like that.
I'm not gonna lie. Also, he's throwing that ass out. I'm not gonna lie, man. Like, that's a little bit of an odd picture. They need to censor that one. We also get to see apparently some sort of an air-to-ground ordnance test that they were conducting. Apparently not from the surveillance drone, because it's not armed, but from something else. We don't know what the hell that is. But we also saw another picture of him smiling and laughing. which I gotta be honest with y'all, these pictures do not make Kim Jong-un look good at all. But you can also see the gentle laborer over there taking notes about how he's laughing. They always have to take notes. North Koreans love those stupid little notebooks where you write down notes like you're actually learning something. And also, there's the Baofeng. Matthew, that is 100% a Baofeng, isn't it?
I don't know. It kind of maybe looks well. I can't really tell. It's too blurry.
Also, like, just taking an assessment of everyone in the background, this guy's wearing no undershirt. Neither is this guy. Nobody's wearing an undershirt here. This guy isn't either. That seems very informal, don't y'all think? And then also there's this guy back here who appears to be with the Navy, and then this guy who appears to be with the Air Force, and he's the only one wearing an undershirt, and it's some tacky-looking sky blue. We also got some more pictures of this Global Hawk abomination that they've made. The paint job's pretty rough. It's kind of like splotchy if you look at it. It's not like equally applied to the fuselage well. We can also see this really bad picture of Kim Jong-un. He had to spread his legs out to let the gut hang. We can also see them firing the missiles. Actually, apparently this is what actually hit that little bunker that we saw in the weapons test was this thing. I don't know what that's supposed to be, but I don't know how in the hell that would actually work in real practice. We can also see it. It's a Lancet.
Really? Like a rip-off Lancet?
Yeah, look at that. That is 100% a solid Lancet ripoff.
Huh. That sure does look like it. Actually, it might be, maybe they were supplied Lancets, maybe?
So this is a tube that launches their Lancets.
Oh, that's interesting. I've never seen that before.
Mortar-fired Lancet. I've never heard of such in my life, but yeah, that's what it is. It's 100% a Zala Lancet that they were testing right here. So folks, North Korea has finally entered the 80s. They have a Global Hawk to conduct reconnaissance with, will get shot down instantly. And then they conduct reconnaissance for their Zala Lancets that will then hit the target. So they finally entered the 1980s in terms of drone reconnaissance and precision strike capabilities. Wow! Wow, that's incredible, Chairman Kim. I wonder how much farther they're going to make it in life. There's not really much more that they can go from here. Also, look at those terrible little buildings in the background behind that weapons test.
You know, it must hurt the people to see this right here getting blown up, this little house right here, whatever this is, because, that's something there that the people could actually lived in because, most people in North Korea are, in abject poverty. So that's something right there they could have probably used. But North Korea is just like sort of taunting the people by exploding something they could have had.
Yeah, and there's Kim Jong-un laughing in the face of it all. He's like, I'm blowing up a Manhattan-style apartment in this country. It's like, hit it. But anyways, moving on from that clip and out of North Korea, it's time for us to move on to India. We were able to hear that the United States is going to be revoking sanction waivers, hitting India's plans to develop Iran's Chabahar port, which is a little bit wild that they want to develop that in the first place. We also got to hear that the USS Nimitz transited the Strait of Hormuz today. There's a lot of air activity involved with that over the course of the hours, and we now have heard that the USS Nimitz has left the Persian Gulf and is entering the Gulf of Oman right now. On top of that, the Israelis also conducted some airstrikes against Hezbollah today. We were able to see picture proof of that, and they also shot down some drones and missiles that were fired at them by the Yemeni Houthis. And we could see one of those drones actually falling on Eilat right here. I cannot play the audio, but here's the clip. We see it slamming down an Eilat after it was shot down. We are not really sure if anyone was wounded or killed in the process of that. Moving on from that clip, however, we have been hearing a lot of people talking about the ongoing situation with Russia possibly supplying North Korea with some nuclear reactors for nuclear submarines. And what are people thinking about that? And what are you thinking about that as well, Matthew?
All right, so this is a rumor that we heard today. There's some reports claiming, and it's just alleging right now, we don't have any concrete proof of it, but some people are alleging in reports that Russia might have supplied North Korea with technology for nuclear submarines, specifically relating to a reactor design, a nuclear reactor that is, that goes in a nuclear submarine. So what are your thoughts about that? It looks like 51% said that would be a geopolitical crisis, while 26% said need more details, and 16% said that's not too serious, it'll still be okay. And right now, we really don't have that concrete proof about it, so it's kind of hard to say exactly where this is going to hit. But we had heard rumors in the past that North Korea was giving equipment to Russia in exchange for some type of nuclear technology. So this would seem to line up with that. But until we get the concrete evidence, it's just hard to say. But if they did get their hands on it, though, that would mean that North Korea could basically develop a nuclear submarine that could go pretty much anywhere around the world, which could be a pretty big deal. So I'm with the 52%. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to be in the 52% 2% that it would be a geopolitical crisis. The problem is, however, is that we don't really know if this is true or not. It's a somewhat uncorroborated report that came out of today, and there wasn't really a lot of source that was provided to it. And also, the North Koreans would have to build a whole submarine around this nuclear reactor because every single submarine that North Korea has currently is a diesel electric, and due to their design, they just do not house the space or the ability to be able to operate a nuclear reactor or be converted into some sort of a nuclear-powered submarine. So they would have to build a whole new submarine, which might be outside of their abilities, because North Korea's ICBM carrier, let's see, North Korean ballistic missile submarine. Let me go pull that up. This was technically not even a new submarine they built. This was just a modification of an older submarine, and they just added a large hump behind the sail to house the missiles in. So I don't even know if they really actually have the ability to manufacture their own submarines, because pretty much every single one that they had, they bought from the Soviet Union back in the day, like this beautiful piece of work right here, and they've just been running those into the ground since then. So I'm not really sure if they even could do anything with them if they had them, and that would still require even further Russian support to field it in a usable submarine. But anyways, with that, we will be moving on from that news out of North Korea and on out of the Middle East and on into Europe, or more so at least one or two posts from the U.S. government today, as we were able to hear that the United States is racing to adopt cheap drone swarms as the Ukraine war exposes gaps in outdated, costly tech. That was according to CNN today. They're a little bit behind the curve, but it does stand true. We are racing to try and develop that kind of technology. On top of that, we also were able to hear that according to the President of the United States, Russia's war in Ukraine, it doesn't affect us because, like, we have a big ocean in between. That's
Man, I like the grammar. I love the grammar. I gotta say, when you add a like right in there, it reminds me of that fella Khamenei in Iran. You remember when he said, "Bibi better not blow up my nuclear shit." It reminds me of that. Like Bibi better chill out. It reminds me of that. It doesn't affect us because, like, we have a big ocean. I love the like. You gotta admit, that's good style right there.
It doesn't affect us because, like, we have a big ocean in between, so it doesn't hurt us. It's not a problem. It's a interesting one with that. We're just going to leave that for what it is, but that was the president's astute observations on Ukraine. There's a big ocean in between us. Anyways, moving on from that and on into the United Kingdom, we also were able to hear that the president stated that Putin had let him down. He's killing many people and he's losing more people that he's killing. That was a statement by the president today in London on the situation with the Russian Federation. Outside of that, we were able to hear that Poland did have to thwart a attempted Russian drone entry today into their country. And we also were able to hear outside of that the Polish Republic is now preparing bomb shelters for public use throughout the country. According to Polish authorities, the government has allocated $5 billion for local authorities to modernize and repair existing shelters, build new protective structures, and develop warning and communication systems, including an app that will be provided to the Polish citizens that will tell them in the midst of an air raid attack where their nearest shelters are and how many people may be inside of that shelter during that time to let them know if there might be some occupancy. We also were able to hear continuing cooperation between the Polish defense minister and that of the state of Ukraine, among other things in the field of acquiring skills and the operation of unmanned aerial vehicles. According to the Polish defense minister, he also stated that the negotiations will focus on the development of joint industrial initiatives between the two countries. So it does appear that the Polish are still racing at this moment to try and create some sort of drone offensive and defensive capabilities. The Baltics have also been busy today on top of that. The Lithuanians are now cutting their last wires, electrical connections, to the Russian Federation's Kaliningrad Oblast. They will also be cutting all of their electrical connections to Belarus here in the earlier part of 2027. Latvia also found the debris of a Russian drone washing up on their coastline today. A picture of it was taken here, and the Polish, the Latvian Ministry of Defense is currently investigating the matter and trying to find out where in the world this drone came from, why it washed up on the shore, and if it's dangerous. The Bulgarians also had a similar incident today where drone parts also washed up on their shorelines along the Black Sea. And it also appears to be the rear wing section of a Shahed. This was probably a lot more mundane than would be expected. This is probably the remnants of a Shahed 136 that was shot down near Odessa, landed in the sea, exploded, blasted itself into pieces, and then this tail section ended up washing up inside of Bulgaria. So probably nothing too crazy with that. But the Latvian one, however, is a little bit crazy because the Russians aren't attacking anyone in the Baltic, so how did that wash up on the shores of the Baltic is unknown at the moment. Estonia also stated that they're going to be conducting a complete stoppage of the importation of Russian natural gas in 2026. And the government announced the decision on September 18th today. Currently, the country can import Russian liquefied natural gas as long as it is not used in the distribution network. After the amendment takes effect, the ban will also cover liquefied natural gas imported outside the distribution network. So the Estonians will be cutting themselves off completely from the Russians, although it's already a trickle. They will be stopping it entirely by the beginning of the next year. Moving us on into the Russian Federation, we have also heard that a Russian petrochemicals plant was hit today around the area of Salavat. Here's the clip. Oh, that's loud. Turn it down, turn it down. We're turning that thing down. But it does appear that that was a pretty successful hit, and it was quite far into Russia at that. The Russian Federation is also continuing to deal with more apocalyptic economic issues, as Gazprom Neft has postponed the start of scheduled maintenance at its Omsk oil refinery as part of government measures aimed at stabilizing the fuel market. So Gazprom is having such a hard time with its finances, it can't even conduct routine scheduled maintenance of its still operational refineries, because it's just trying to stabilize the fuel market at all at the moment, with the crippling fuel shortages now gripping the country. So things are going quite badly inside of Russia. These little glimpses and windows into the Russian economy are not painting an optimistic picture whatsoever. Moving us on into Ukraine for the remainder of the news that we have inside of the country, we also got to see a Ukrainian F-16AM shooting down a Russian drone with an AIM-9 Sidewinder. And there goes that AIM-9 from that F-16, and right on the target.
And Ukraine did that?
Ukraine did that.
Oh, wow. They're doing the Polish expensive version of shooting them down, I guess you could say. They're testing the same thing.
Man, Zelenskyy went, 300 grand, one drone. Man, he's like,
we're going to flex on Poland. If they can do it, we can do it too.
welcome back, everyone. This is Mr. Zelenskyy, or as they say, Mr. Zeist. And today we're going to be throwing a $300,000 missile at a $40,000 drone. Let's see how it goes. Whoosh. Wow, that like blew up. That's crazy. But moving on into our location unknowns, we also were able to see the Ukrainians downing another drone. This one was actually pretty interesting. I don't know what that song was at the start, but we're muting it. But look at that. It's a Russian Zala Lancet being chased down by a Ukrainian anti-drone drone, and the hit was successful. We rarely ever get a third person like that. Moving on.
He's free falling.
And I'm free! I can't even hit the note. Anyways, moving on from that. Oh, that was rough. I'm about to get grilled for that one. But the Russian casualty report was also quite nice today as well. As Miss Disa, keeper of the record, stated, the 390 drones is the third highest daily loss. And 62,000 vehicles even has been reached. What a big day, everyone. What a big day. And over the course of the past 24 hours, Russian Federation armed forces have suffered 930 wounded and killed, 122 vehicles destroyed, 2 main battle tanks, 33 artillery pieces, 390 drones, and 1 MLRS all destroyed. It's quite one hell of a day, I'll have to say. Also, by the way, I wanted to throw this in while I was still thinking about it. You know, the president is in Britain today. As many of you all know, that's where a lot of the comments that he was making were coming out of today. It was inside of London. And, you know, folks, I actually saw that at the state banquet that was being held by the King, His Majesty King Charles III. He's only the third Charles in British monarchical history. But beyond that, he actually mentioned Birmingham, Alabama in his speech today. Hey, let's go, baby! Raise hail, praise Dale. Totally forgot to mention that. Because he said that America had a common link, like the ones between Birmingham, England, and Birmingham, Alabama. And I was like, honestly,
you have to remember the deep links between the two places. One's in Alabama, one's in Britain. There's probably zero similarities outside of the name.
I'm going to be honest with you. The one difference between Birmingham, Alabama and in Birmingham, England is that if you called someone from Birmingham and Alabama a Brummy, you get hands. like you get straight hands. I went to Birmingham, Alabama, where I ended up getting punched in the face. I called someone a brummie, and they didn't like it. Like, it's like, bro, that's how it ended up. Anyways, moving on from that down to the UK. Just wanted to mention that today. I thought that was actually pretty crazy that Birmingham, Alabama was mentioned by the King of the United Kingdom. I was like, that's a little bit wild. I didn't expect that in the cards today. But moving on into the front lines in Ukraine, we also were able to see around the Severonsky Forest area, the Ukrainians in the 63rd Brigade continuing to hit the Russians.
You know, the only problem with the king saying that Birmingham, Alabama and Birmingham, England, were similar in some respects is because there's like a big ocean between the two.
They're not really similar because there's like a big ocean in between. Like it's man.
There's like a big swimming pool in between there and here. They said that you don't want to swim in that water. That water is rough. They said it's got undercurrents. You got to be careful. Those sharks, I tell you, they come up and take a chomp out of your leg. They like leg. They love legs so much. You gotta love those sharks for that.
They know a good thigh when they see one. But moving on from that and down to Seversk, we also get to see the Signum unit continuing to strike Russian forces around the Seversk front, including this unsuspecting Buhanka. Actually, change of target. This car. Oh, that guy just saw it. Now we can see them going after another. Oh! And then now they're going after a dirt bike. Bam.
Oh dear. I was the guy riding that dirt bike like it was just like in the middle of like a city or something. Like, oh, look at the loaf bouncing. Look at it go.
Dude, that thing is bouncing. And bro, he was just casually looking at it, man. He just, hello, darkness, my old friend. He was like, man, this is it.
Man, the Russians thought the rule when the vans rocking that don't come a knocking. Well, it looks like the Ukrainians just violated that rule.
Signum. Alpha. Man. Anyways, moving on from the Signum units footage and past the Pokrovsk front, since we already covered that earlier in the stream, we also got to see down in the Kherson area a TM-62. This was kind of unique. Not really, but, it's neat.
Kind of like a garbage tank. How's it so rusted already?
You know, when that steel catches on fire and it melts all the paint away, it pretty much leaves exposed steel to the elements, and it rusts quickly, like over a course of a couple of days. Like within a week, the thing is fully oxidized.
Damn, that's crazy, too. It just turns straight into scrap.
Yeah, honestly.
Old clunker would have gone good in a museum.
Man, look at all those Contact 1 bricks that came flying off like Lego pieces when it got hit, just all over the ground.
Isn't that kind of dangerous to be stepping near it? Couldn't it, like, mess somebody's foot up?
Nah, you'd have to, like, really slam those things. You'd have to, like, shoot them for them to blow up. And this guy is, like, trying to make an ASMR video. He's going, it's like that damn caterpillar from that meme.
You see, there's tanks in deep trouble right here.
Man, he's like that caterpillar from that Russian cartoon that turned into a meme where he's like, it's like, bro, it's like, get that shit away from me.
Make sure you put your car cover over tanks. Don't leave them out in the rain.
He's very quiet observing this thing, but it is a T-62M that was lost. T-62Ms are pretty old. Fairly ancient, mind you all. They were around a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. Let me go see if I can show y'all like an older picture of a T-62M from back in the day. Let me go pull it up. Cold War. Oh, eventually. Here you are. Here's one in Afghanistan. This is how old they were. They were around in the 80s, and they were fairly old by then. Let me see if I can find out another picture of the T-62M. Or the T-63M. I cannot find another one. Oh, well, there's one in Israel, funnily enough. But, dang. I just can't find another one of these. That's not even a T-62M. That's just a T-62A. But, these things are quite... What in the hell? Oh, this is a model kit. I was like, what in the world? I was like, man, they eviscerated this thing. But anyways, moving on from all that. Side notes, everyone. Side notes, heavens. But it is time for us to move on up to Kyiv and cover the speech from President Volodymyr Zelenskyy here on this very day, which was announcing that counteroffensive. Zelenskyy looking happy as hell at the beginning of that speech, by the way. Like, that thumbnail, he was looking very happy. But nevertheless, here's the speech. Peach!
Bitch!
Бажаю здоров'я, шановні українці, українки. Сьогодні Донеччина, Краматорськ, Слов'янськ, наші бойові бригади, спілкування з нашими воїнами. Я відзначив державними нагородами саме за успіхи в боях найкращих наших воїнів, тих, хто проявив себе найбільше цими тижнями. Ми здійснюємо зараз одну з наших контрнаступальних операцій. Хлопці молодці на Донецькому напрямку, в районі Покровська, в районі Добропілля. Жорсткі бої, але вдалося завдати росіянам відчутних втрат. Фактично, наші сили позбавляють окупанта можливості здійснити на цьому напрямку наступальну, повноцінну операцію, яку вони планували довго і на яку розраховували. Спочатку Сумщина була у них, тепер тут. І українські підрозділи досягають результату для України. Я дякую всім, хто задіяний. Операція триває так, як ми визначали. Важливий успіх України. Дякую ДШВ, штурмовим полкам і батальйонам, і всім нашим піхотинцям, розвідникам, артилеристам, підрозділам Національної гвардії. Дякую кожному, хто забезпечує безпілотну складову. Була сьогодні перша доповідь головкома Сирського по результатах. За час від початку операції наші воїни вже звільнили 160 квадратних кілометрів, ще більш ніж 170 квадратних кілометрів очищені від окупанта. Суттєво поповнили наш обмінний фонд, майже сотня вже є російських полонених. Будуть ще вже 7 населених пунктів на напрямку звільнені, ще 9 очищені від російської присутності. Будь-яку групу окупантів, які намагаються сюди заходити, знищують наші хлопці. Втрати росіян тільки від початку цієї нашої контрнаступальної операції, тільки в районі Покровська, тільки цими тижнями вже більш ніж 2,5 тисячі, із них більш ніж 1300 росіян вбито. Україна цілком справедливо захищає свої позиції, захищає свою землю. Це героїчний захист. Я пишаюсь нашими воїнами, пишаюсь нашими людьми. Україна в цій війні знаходить захист від кожної російської підлості. Ми зриваємо всі їх російські плани, плани знищення нашої держави. Наша оборона завжди активна, і ми довели, що українці можуть досягати необхідних результатів, навіть тоді досягати, коли багато хто в світі очікує результатів від Росії. Важливо, щоб і партнери діяли достойно, саме так, як наші люди заслуговують на підтримку. Росію треба змусити до миру. Це може зробити Україна за наявності достатньої сили в нашій армії, достатньої далекобійності. Це може зробити світ разом з нами, безумовно, сильними санкціями проти Росії, сильним тиском і таким же сильним, як і сильні наші люди. Я хочу подякувати кожному, хто б'ється заради України. Слава Україні!
Героям слава!
And with that, that is the end of the speech from President Volodymyr Zelenskyy here on this very day of the war. And that's going to be moving us on into the second segment of the stream, where we get to talk to each and every single one of y'all. And boy, howdy. What a fun segment that is. We get to talk about literally anything and everything, all the time, anywhere and everywhere. And that is a fun thing. The only thing we don't talk about on this channel is religion, politics, let's see, whether climate change is a thing or not, and if the A-10 is viable on the battlefield. Those are the 4 topics that we will not touch ever on this channel. But beyond that,
Also, the Gulf of America is the Gulf of Mexico. We don't touch that one either.
Well, we kind of touched that one. I think like we kind of touched that one a little bit, but beyond that, we are going to be getting on into that second segment because it is a fun time, folks. And I also got to thank you all so much for watching tonight. We had a peak viewership of 13.1 thousand people. That's quite a large amount. And we also had 70,000 people watch this stream in just the first hour and 40 minutes. I got to be honest, the news was interesting today, but it was a little bit of a slower news day altogether. But we're still happy to have had each and every single one of y'all here with us today, while we covered all of the news that had been coming out. And so, without further ado, we have one last question that we've asked of all of y'all. And Matthew, what are people thinking about it, and what are you thinking about it as well?
All right, so let's jump right into our last poll question right here. It says Ukraine will provide Poland access to drone systems to defend NATO borders, and is Ukraine now indispensable to the NATO alliance? And it looks like 56% said yes, Ukraine is now invaluable to NATO, while 27% said no, Ukraine's tech can be copied soon, and 8% said NATO might not even care. And I would say NATO certainly cares. The Russian drone attack on Poland proved that they care. And that now you're seeing Poland, the US, and pretty much every other NATO country scrambling to try to contract with Ukraine to get access to their drone technology and also training from their soldiers. Like, for example, Medyar and all of his gang of guys there who know how to fly these drones really well. They're trying to get that help. So I would say I'm with the 55%. Ukraine is certainly invaluable at this point, and it's very good that Ukraine found a way to make themselves invaluable because that makes it a lot harder for countries like the United States to simply abandon Ukraine if they suddenly change their mind tomorrow or over the next 2 weeks. So thankfully, Ukraine will have that up their sleeve. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say that I would have to be with the 56% as well. Ukraine is now invaluable to NATO. The kind of expertise, the kind of knowledge that they have, it's invaluable. It's something that you couldn't get elsewhere. You'd have to learn it through a lot of pain and suffering, really, on the front lines. And that's what makes the Ukrainians a very good country to be friends with, is that they'll give you all that information, no expense, suffering, or fighting included. You just have to be friends with them and give them some stuff, and they'll give you that back in return. It's a mutual sort of a thing. It's a mutual sort of a thing. You know, no longer these days can people say that Zelensky's scamming the West or conning them, because they're giving us back valuable information now. It's not just a one-way street like some people have tried to make it out to be, which it really wasn't anyways. It's now definitely a two-way street, a mutualistic sort of a cooperation between alliances and states.
Man, it's true. Zelenskyy has moved on. He is now hawking a course for $19.99. You can buy Zelenskyy's course and learn how to pilot military drones, the best in the world, as they say out there. So yeah, I guess Zelenskyy's turned into a Giga Chad, and he's living up to his full potential now because he's selling courses. Of course, that's a joke, but seriously though, like he could sell a course.
In one of those speeches one day, Matthew, he's going to go, I have to thank the West for giving us a chance to fight the Russians and continue to survive. And you too can have a chance to survive if you subscribe to my course, Ukrainian Drone Warfare 101. For only $20 a month, you too can get access to key and valuable information to help you to defend your national airspace against Russian invaders and to make them pay dearly.
The doctors hate this one little trick.
Russians hate me. See how I destroyed the Russian army with one simple trick. Click on the link in the description.
Man, Zelenskyy could be a clickbait master if he ever got into YouTube. I'll tell you what, he has some titles he can put on some videos that would be whoppers, I tell you.
Hi, everyone. Dude, he's going to turn around one day. He's going to have a new hairdo. He's going to go, hi, everyone. Billy Mays here. Today I have something great for y'all. It's called Drone Gun. It's a great system. Look at this. You take one truck with a machine gun on it, and you look up into the sky with a spotlight. Oh, see that? That's a Russian drone. And with the swift ease of Drone Gun, it's gone. It's totally gone. It will never pose a problem again. And you too can get this system. And if you call now, you can actually get 2 technicals, 1 free. Buy one, get one free. It's a amazing deal. It's a wonderful deal. And it helps the Ukrainian state to raise the money to keep beating the shit out of the Russians.
They say the gremlin in the Kremlin hates this one little trick. They say they hate it so much. They hate it. Well, I'm sorry. What do you say about that? Zelenskyy hates what little trick? Nothing, sir. Nothing. We don't have any tricks in Ukraine. No tricks. Tricks are for kids, and we have none here. We have none of that here.
They say tricks are for kids. Those people are suckers. We are all into tricks. we put freaking drones into mobile home containers, and we blow up bombers with them. Tell me that's not a goofy trick. I play a piano with my wiener. That is a whole trick and a half. And I might play a piano with my wiener, but I'm worth 500 million and you're not. Like, so there's the difference. But anyways, with that, it is time for us to get on into the questions. We are absolutely losing it right now, but I hope y'all are getting a good laugh out of this. And of course, I have to make this clear before some people get their, their underwear in a bunch. We just joke around on the channel. There's absolutely no ill bone at all to our jokes, because we make jokes on the last president and people took it personally. We make jokes on the current president, people take it personally. We make jokes on Zelenskyy, and someone out there is going to take it personally. Like, just liven up a little. They're just jokes for the hell of it, so you take them for what they are. And I'm not ever apologizing for jokes. Just want to put that out there. Like, before some people think they're going to pressure us into making an apology one day, we never will. So with that, we are on to the questions. What do we got, Matthew?
All right, so jumping right into our super chats once again. This one goes to none other than BC Skyman, a channel legend, by the way. He throws in a $120 support, the largest support of the night, and a huge shout to you, BC, for that once again. And he did say that he was going to be, I believe he said, in New York, I think it was, in the upcoming days. So he's going to be going to New York, of all places, so he might be absent from the stream for a little bit. But we understand, BC. Hopefully you can pop in from time to time on that little trip there, and hopefully you can be in the live chat. We're glad to have you. But Enforcer, what say you?
And I gotta say a massive thanks to you for the support, BC Scamming, and I hope you have a fun time in New York. I've never been to New York myself, but one day I want to go. Really, I want to go see this whole area up here, because at this point, I think that is the only part of the country I haven't seen. I've seen everything up to Washington, D.C., and as far west as Seattle and L.A., and everything in between for the large part at this point, although most of it was just kind of passing through, and I didn't really get a lot of time to see it. But one place I've never been is north of Washington, D.C., which is kind of a little bit funny, folks, because we live in the South, and we've technically never left Dixie, at least going north. The farthest we ever made it was Washington, D.C., which is the only thing that's across the Mason-Dixon line, and we've never gone further north than that. And I really have wanted to for years, folks. I've wanted to go see New York City and Boston for the longest times, specifically, because I've always just wondered, what is New York City like even? Like, a lot of people crap on it, but there's got to be something interesting about it. That's like the home of the largest American city in the nation. It's also the largest city economically in the country too. So it's like there's got to be something going on there that's a little bit interesting. And then Boston's cool because it's just one of the original cities of America to a degree. I don't know about Philadelphia or Baltimore. I have heard that Baltimore's pretty bad, but usually a lot of people say a place is bad, and then you go there and it's not too bad. So, maybe Philadelphia and Baltimore would be on the menu. Honestly, folks, that is just a northeastern corridor excursion right there, Matthew. Like, get on the train at Washington and just stop on every city on the corridor up to Boston.
Yeah, I've heard the crime's really bad in like sort of a lot of places in between Washington and Boston. Like Philadelphia is like crime central from what I've heard. They're really, really tough. And then obviously New York's got this crime problem. I think it might be going down a little bit, or at least that's what you're saying. And then Baltimore's got a crime problem. Honestly, that's like a lot of crime that goes on in some of those major cities up there.
Yeah, but then again, they say that about like LA and Seattle and everything, and honestly, they weren't that bad. Like, you could get around and be fine there. Yeah, honestly, folks, I think a lot of that stuff's kind of overblown a little bit by folks, like the crime or lack thereof. Because honestly, folks, like, I don't know, just passing through as a tourist in some of these places, it doesn't seem as bad as where we come from. Statistically, where we come from is actually the worst place in the country. Like, Birmingham and Bessemer are the most crime-ridden countries in America right now, like in terms of violent crime rates and everything. Well, cities, sorry, in the country. I get mixed up with my words, folks, but y'all know what I mean. But Birmingham and Bessemer, this is Birmingham and this is Bessemer, are actually the most dangerous cities in America right now by the crime statistics that were released by the FBI. Going anywhere else, it seems a little bit better because this is what our downtowns kind of are like. The rest of it's nice, but the downtowns are terrible. So whenever we go to a place like LA or Seattle or anywhere in between, it doesn't really seem that bad. I mean, hell, folks, even Portland wasn't really that bad. Like, at least everything that wasn't downtown. Like, downtown's pretty damn bad. Like, downtown's scary. It's exactly what they make it out to be. I'm not even kidding. Like, when y'all see the stuff about Portland, and, they're like, oh, it's, like, overridden with, like, violent homeless people that are, like, drug addicts, that's downtown Portland, and they are 100% right. But the rest of the city isn't too bad, at least from what I saw. And also, Vancouver, Washington's actually really nice. Vancouver, Washington's like their nice part of the city, or kind of like a suburb of their city. But still, beyond that, You know, some fairly interesting stuff out there. But one day I would like to go up there to New York myself, BC Skyman. And where are you going? Are you going to Utica, Syracuse, upstate New York, Rochester, Buffalo, Ithaca, the town that they named a whole shotgun after? Have y'all ever heard of the Ithaca shotgun?
I haven't.
You haven't? You mean you
I have
haven't heard of
not.
this one?
No, I haven't. I've seen that one, but I didn't know the name of it.
Man, this thing was a legend in Vietnam. Like, this thing was a legend. The Ithaca is a great shotgun. From what I've heard, I've never been able to get one myself and see, but I really like the style of them. They look cool. I like the heat shields, which are pretty cool. Generally, the Ithaca is a really cool shotgun, and it was named after Ithaca, New York, which is pretty cool. And oh, is that Cornell University? The famous Cornell? Wow.
It is. Look at that. It's Cornell.
Wow, look at that. I actually didn't know that Cornell was in Ithaca. So they have a really goated university from what I know. I think it's like an Ivy League university, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it's a pretty top one. Yeah.
So it's an Ivy League university, and then they have a shotgun named after town. I mean, they kind of got it going on with Ithaca, you know? Like, that's not a bad place. But you know, pretty interesting. Oh, by the way, speaking of this upper New England area, I actually heard, Matthew, that recently there was something really cool that was done, and I have to include it because it's a regional part of the history in this area, and I'm sure many people from New England, specifically Maine, will know about this, is that they have a Boston and Maine heritage unit now up there for I forgot which railroad it is. It's the Massachusetts Bay Transportation Authority, and they just came out with this. The heritage unit for the Boston and Maine, which looks really clean.
Yeah, it looks pretty clean right there. I gotta admit, that's a good looking train there.
That's a pretty good looking one, honestly. Like, nobody could diss on it, especially when this is what the MBTA trains look like normally, which is ugly. This one's actually really nice looking. So I was like, wow, that's really cool. I wish they'd bring back classy paint jobs like this, folks, because, you know, like the American Airlines, like the airlines in the United States, like Delta and American, and United, they actually have pretty good paint jobs. I like their liveries. I think they're cool and they're visually pleasing. But with some of the railroads out there, like the publicly managed ones, like MBTA and New Jersey Transit and stuff, and Mark, they really don't have good paint jobs, but the Boston Maine's paint job is really clean. I really like that one, and I like that they made a heritage unit of it. I just wish they'd make that, or any paint job that's better than the current MBTA one, the one of the system, because this looks nice. Like, this looks like a train that you would go up to, Matthew, and be like, man, this is classy looking, because it looks really classy. But anyways, enough about this heritage unit. I had to throw that in, though, because that was news I heard recently, and I was like, oh, nice. And also, here's some other heritage units. They have New Haven, and, well, actually, they have both of the New Haven heritage units here. I was about to say, the New Haven and the New Haven, and they're both New Haven, just different paint schemes. I'm not really a big fan of the New Haven, but they had some okay paint jobs. Not the greatest, though, in my opinion, but they were all right. Anyways, with that, it is time for us to move on out of this little rabbit hole. But I hope you have a fun time in New York, BC Scamming. And a huge thanks to you so much once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running, because it has been folks like you who have supported this channel and made this thing possible for years. And you are an old guard and channel legend, and we thank you for the support, because it is pretty much through the viewer support alone that we keep this channel running. So I got to give you all a huge thanks so much once again, and you specifically, BC Scamming. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one here goes to Little Bear, who throws in another support, this time a $50 donation. And thank you very much, Little Bear, for the second support of the night. They said skid steer artillery. Oh, now that's interesting. They said skid steer mortar. Please explain why the two.
Skid steer mortars just make sense. Like, that actually is an idea that makes a pretty good bit of sense in a way, having like a self-propelled mortar of a sort. Technically, you can do that with an LAV or a Striker. Striker mortar carrier. Let me see if I can pull up a mortar carrier. This is kind of like a skid steer mortar carrier. Actually, sorry. Whoopsie daisy. That's not the right one. We need to get the mortar carrier variant. The Striker is such a universal system. I really like him. This is the Striker mortar carrier. These things can carry a 120 millimeter mortar or an 81 millimeter mortar, but generally they carry the 120. And these things are pretty cool. It's kind of like a skid steer in a way, kind of like a Bobcat, just a little bit bigger and roided up. But I would say that these things are great. They're highly maneuverable. They are able to quickly move into position, fire off some rounds, and then move out because the mortar position is quite literally fixed in place in a mortar pit at the rear of the vehicle. And all you have to do is stow the mortar, close the hatches, and you're on the move immediately. The shoot and scoot time is non-existent, and the movability and maneuverability of the units is great. So I generally have to say, skid steer mortars are a great idea and generally are great in actual practice. But you know something that's cool, folks, is that nobody gives the Striker a great deal of credit, but it is a really versatile vehicle. Here is the ATGM carrier of the Striker that fires off TOW-2s. Here is the mortar carrier Striker that we were just talking about. This is the M1128, which has a 105mm main gun on an automated turret. Here is a Striker APC that carries troops. Here is another Striker that also has a modified remote turret on board with a Gal rotary cannon. You know, very versatile sort of a thing. There's even more. But wait, there's more. There is the Striker Dragoon, which has a chain gun, a 30mm chain gun. So it's kind of like a Bradley in a sense, but more maneuverable. Without the ATGM launcher, by the way. Forgot to mention that. Here's another APC version with a remote 50 cal turret instead of a 12.7 rotary cannon. Let me see here. Here's an ambulance Striker. Here is a mine-clearing Striker. This is pretty much just the APC, but at the same time it has a mine roller in front of it, which is a nice addition.
Don't the wheels turn on these, though? Like, this isn't really like a true skid steer, is it?
Yeah, the wheels do turn. Like, I think all 4 axles are actually articulated to where they can turn.
Yeah, that's not really a skid steer. Like, when I was thinking of a skid steer, I was, like, thinking of, like, a Bobcat, you know, like the type that's tracked, like the type that actually, like, skids to steer. Like, this right here is really not a skid steer, I would say.
Not really, yeah. Like, technically it really isn't. But honestly, folks, I just gotta be straight up with y'all. The Striker is one of the greatest systems that we've made because it's so versatile, and you can pretty much make one to fit any sort of mission that the military would have. So, honestly, a great vehicle. They can be APCs, mortar carriers, ambulances, anti-tank vehicles. They can be infantry support, direct fire, like this one is with a 105mm main gun. I mean, it's truly an amazing sort of a vehicle, at least in what it can do. It's like the modern version of an LAV, because the Marines have the LAV, and theirs is kind of similar in a way, but it's a much older sort of a system. But still, just the coolest thing. And it also is derived from the LAV-3, which is Canada's version of the Striker.
That's interesting. It looks very, very close to it.
Yeah, it's really close. And I think this one was actually developed from the original LAVs.
That's what in the world, man? Those are a little bit funny looking.
These are the ones that the Marines have.
Huh, yeah, those don't look quite as good.
Yeah, they're a little old, but they were really versatile as well. They're like all the different variants that the Striker has, the LAV had it beforehand. Like the LAV had the ambulance variants, the anti-tank missile carriers, this 25mm Bushmaster autocannon variant. They didn't really have the Dragoon like this is the closest they got to the Dragoon variant. They also had the mortar carriers. So the LAV is as versatile. Also the LAV, interestingly enough, had a LAVAD. Let me go pull that up to show y'all. Let's see. They had an air defense variant with a 20mm rotary cannon and also 8 Stingers ready to go in 2 individually mounted Stinger pods.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, that is pretty cool. But then the Striker actually, let's see here. The Striker actually updated that because now there is a Striker air defense variant. Air defense. Here we go. Now there is a Striker air defense variant out there, which is super sick because it has a chain gun, a singular pod with 4 Stingers inside of it, and it also mounts Hellfires. So this is actually a multi-purpose vehicle, at least with how it's supposed to be designed and worked. And what is super cool, folks, about the Hellfire is that if you laser designate a target that is airborne, you can actually fire these at helicopters. So this is a air-to-air and air-to-ground vehicle in the same package. And you can also modernize these as well, like you can see with this one right here, to have the trophy systems mounted on board as well, which gives it a little bit more survivability against incoming ATGM. So really cool sort of a system, the Striker. It's an incredibly neat and interesting kind of a vehicle. So anyways, I hope we all enjoyed that little rant about the Striker and why it's cool, why it's one of the greatest sorts of vehicles that we have in the military right now. But, anyways, we are on to the next one.
Also, Little Bear said, "Why mortar over artillery? What's the difference?"
Mortars are cheaper, and also mortars are a little bit faster to react. The way that artillery works in general is that mortars are supposed to be smaller in caliber, much shorter in range, but a lot quicker and more maneuverable, at least in a sense of frontline combat. And it's supposed to be direct fire support for the infantry. So usually you'll see that a mortar crew is directly integrated into some sort of an infantry unit. Artillery, like a 105 millimeter or a 155 millimeter artillery piece that you would see as a NATO standard, those are generally for heavier fire support, heavier resistance like armor. You can laser guide a Excalibur round onto an armored target and destroy it, or you could have greater artillery support that is able to conduct greater suppression if a unit is pinned down by enemy fire and they need to maneuver, or that artillery can be used to target rear line units like command headquarters, logistics units, such things like that, and also just provide greater artillery or fire support whenever needed that the mortars aren't really able to deal with or cover. So that's kind of the difference between the two. Kind of like every system, it kind of works its way up. The higher priority to target, the larger sort of an artillery system is used in general. So with that, I hope that addresses that well, and we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one here goes to DJ Dava, who puts in a $20 support, and thank you very much, DJ, for that support once again. And they said, "Hello, enforcers. Much love to y'all, and LSA."
Hey, and a big thanks to you for the support, the kind words. And of course, long live the Lee Spring Army, and the Lee Spring Army will never die. So a huge thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that well. And also, Terry, you are correct. The mortar also has a much steeper fire arc as well, which means that the rounds pretty much come down vertically. With artillery rounds, they actually come in at something of an angle, like a 45-degree angle or a little bit greater than that. A mortar will come in at a near 80-degree angle sometimes. So that means that you can get those things, or at least the rounds, over, say, a wall or any sort of other fortification or buildings for that matter to get more precise fire in a very contained space, which usually conventional artillery systems really aren't able to do too well. Like, for example, howitzer. Well, actually, pretty much all artillery systems in the modern day, the 105s and the 155s that we use in the West, those are technically howitzers because of their fire arc and range. Mortars are more so splashing down literally vertically over a target, and that's also a really big difference between the mortar and a howitzer, like you would see in a larger caliber. So with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next super chat is going to go to Old Warrior, another channel legend, and he puts in a $20 support. And thank you very much, good sir, for that support. He said, "Russia wants to buy back 2 of the S-400s they sold to Turkey, and will the Turks sell?"
They probably will, actually. It's hilarious that they're doing that, but because of the sanctions, Turkey actually hasn't been able to buy any parts from Russia to keep their S-400s operational, so they're getting towards the end of their self-sufficient lifespan before they start to break down. So they're probably going to sell them back to the Russians because those air defense systems are about to become useless anyways. So they probably will end up giving those back to the Russians, just getting their money back in a way. And so with that,
Isn't that crazy? Like the Russians trying to buy back their air defense systems. That's wild. Like that's really embarrassing as hell right there. Like they apparently can manufacture their own, or at least enough of them to keep up with the ones being
yeah.
destroyed. That's wild.
Honestly, man, what they're probably wanting to buy them back for is the target acquisition radars, which they're in short supply of right now. Launchers, they still have an okay amount of, but the acquisition radars for the air defense batteries, they're running out of those quicker than they can replace them. So that's probably why they're buying them back. But at the same time, that's sad for the Russians, but honestly kind of a good position for the Turks. They got a somewhat mediocre air defense system, and they're pretty much going to get their money back years later after the whole deal's over. I mean, kind of not bad for the Turks if you're looking at it from a Turkish standpoint. But anyways, with that, we are going to be moving on to the next one.
All right, and our next one goes to Eric, who puts in a 20, and thank you very much, Eric, as well. He said, "What is the state of our American drone industry? And I'm worried the Chinese will overwhelm us with sheer numbers, and quantity can sometimes be quality. And thank you, gentlemen, for your hard work to get the news to the people." And honestly, Eric, our drone industry is in foul shape. I'm not going to make any bones about it. The U.S. knows it's in foul shape, and we're behind the curve. Now, it's up for debate why we're so far behind. Like, the reason why we're so far behind, that's sort of debatable. I would personally say The reason why we are so far behind is because the companies that we have here in the United States, the ones that are typically the go-to defense contractors, they like to sell larger systems. They like to sell legacy weapons, is what I call them. And they're massive, very expensive systems. They're not really in the business of creating disposable technologies like that, but they're going to have to get into that business, or otherwise we're going to be in a foul shape as a country, because that's going to be the biggest threat on the modern battlefield. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say that, at least in my opinion, in the drone technology industry, I was trying to get up to speed there, folks. I was trying to think about what the question was, but the drone industries in the United States are well behind the curve. Generally, ours are more artisan-like in their production abilities. They're incredibly small numbers and batches, and they're usually high-end in quality. Like if you look at a Reaper or a Predator or any sorts of drones like that, they are fairly minute in number compared to what the Ukrainians will field in just drone numbers alone. And also, they're fairly antiquated in what they are. Like, to just be honest with y'all, the Global Hawk, the Reapers, and the Predators, as far as recon drones are going, are obsolete. And they were good ideas when they were first made, but the air war has evolved so much, they are not going to be usable. Those things are only going to be usable in situations where we're not at war, like right now. Once we go to war, much like all of the Ukrainian drones that the Ukrainians got at the beginning of the war, like the Bayraktars, they're going to end up becoming obsolete pretty quickly because enemy air defense will shoot them down like nothing. They can't maneuver, and they're incredibly slow, so if they come into the range of any air defense systems, they will be shot down instantly. So that's what our drones currently look like right now. That's pretty much the large bulk of our kinds of drone forces, and they are going to be pretty susceptible to air defense fire. As far as our numerous sorts of kamikaze and FPV drones that you would see in Ukraine, we have none, and we're still working on trying to get that off of the ground right now, but it's just happening at such a slow speed because of how the war industry works in this country. It's going to be a long time before we see anything come out of it that will be successful or on a large scale. The only company that's really doing anything like that is Anduril, and they are kind of still at that artisanal level at this point, but they're starting to work up their way towards getting to a mass industrial output, or at least a conceivable idea of being able to do that at some point in the future. So I hope that does address that well, at least in my opinion. But a huge thanks to you for the support and helping this channel to keep on running, because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to make this channel possible, and we wouldn't be able to keep it running. So a huge thanks to you so much once again, and we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to John Brewer, who puts in a $20 support. And thank you very much, John, as well, for supporting the channel and also helping to keep us running. And while we're at it, a big shout out to Luke UK, threw in a 10 as well without a comment. And a huge shout out to both of you, John and Luke, for that support. But Enforcer, what say you?
And a big shout out to John and Luke for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. Because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to keep this channel running. We wouldn't be able to make the news possible every day and continue to talk about all the big things going on in the world. You know, like what's going on down in South America or the Middle East or East Asia or Europe or really anywhere else. We wouldn't be able to talk about it. And I got to thank y'all massively for supporting this channel and enjoying it, because y'all are the ones who make the news possible every day. I know we work hard on this channel, and we sit here and we talk a great deal and cover that news and give that analysis, but we wouldn't be able to do this every day if we weren't able to buy our bread and butter, keep our lights on, and pay the rent. And it's you fine
Thanks
folks.
to all y'all, fish and man can coexist peacefully again.
Man, it's thanks to y'all that we are able to put an end to all this disinformation on the news and get down to what's really going on out there. Now watch this drive. but still, a huge thanks to you, to both of y'all so much once again. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next super chat goes to Thomas D. Orazio, who puts in a $20 support. And thank you very much, Thomas, for that support as well. He said, "Great work, gents, and keep explaining to the world that Russia is not winning the war, and feel free to take one from the chat."
And thank you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. Now, I'd have to agree with you. There, 100%. And of course, we will make sure to get one from the live chat in your honor. So, what do we got, Matthew?
And the live chat question in honor of Thomas goes to Fire Guy, who said, "Can you confirm if the U.S. denied any future military funding to Taiwan today?"
Yes, we did. We actually denied $400 million, I believe it was, in armed support to Taiwan today. The reasons were not given, so I don't know why we did that. It doesn't really make any sense. but we did. So I really can't speak to that much further because we don't really have a good reason or justification as to why that was done. Because this is only a little while after a U.S. mission went to Taiwan and pretty much said that they need to become an independent country, which is an incredibly sort of provocative thing to say, given the kind of diplomatic standing we have in that area. And it's a little bit weird. I really do not know what to make of it. So with that, I hope that addresses that the best I can. I just don't really know why that was done, though. I can't even begin to explain why. And with that, we're on to the next one.
All right, and our next one here is going to go to Matthew Mardrosians, or Mardrosians, actually. And thank you very much, Matthew, for that support right there, and we do appreciate that. And I was looking here because he said he had a problem throwing in the question with the super chat, so I was just trying to make sure I didn't miss it here. I think he was going to throw it into the live chat, so I was scrolling through here to see if I spot it. Let's see here. I don't see it yet, but Matthew, let me know when you throw that in. Tag me in the live chat, and we will return back to it here. So let me know when that gets put in there, and I will return to it. But in the meantime, though, we're moving on to our next one, which goes to LSA Sergeant Figment, who puts in a 10. And thank you very much, LSA Sergeant Figment, for that support. He said, I will be vacationing in Aruba over the Thanksgiving holiday week. And do you think there could be any issues with flying to Aruba, especially since the island is just off the coast of Venezuela?
I don't really know. I don't really know if we're planning on going to a war. I mean, Aruba is really close to Venezuela. It's at the farthest from the mainland of Venezuela. It's about 18 miles or so. So it is fairly close. I really don't know if it's safe to go down there right now, but I would just follow the Department of State's travel advisories. And if they say it's safe, it probably is safe. If they say it's not safe, then I would certainly avoid it at all costs. Because if a war is going to be starting down there, it probably wouldn't be good to be about 17 miles away from an enemy country. Who knows what they might do at that point. But I also would have a feeling that they would have their hands tied with fighting the United States. So lashing out at little islands like Aruba and so on would be outside of their prerogatives or priorities at that moment. So with that, I hope that does address that well the best I can. A huge thanks to you for the support and helping the channel to keep on running, LSC Sergeant Figment. And also, before we move on, I saw a bot ask this question, but I'm going to answer it really quickly just to make it clear because we haven't said this in a while, and I want to make sure that we make this very clear to folks who might be new. This channel is a full-time job. This is a business. Our business is news. We do not do this as charity, and we don't work for free. Like everyone else, we have bills to pay, lights to keep on in the background, and people supporting this channel. Your support 100% goes to supporting this channel and helping it to keep running. That means helping us to make a living off of this thing and pay our bills. If you would like to support Ukraine, that is 100% fine by us. We have Sunday night fundraisers that are set up so that way if you want your money to go to Ukraine and not us, or either one or both, or just us and not Ukraine, you have the option to be able to do that. But if you're asking if the personal income that we are taking in on super chats on a daily basis is going to Ukraine, the answer is no. That is money that we use to live, and it's great to know that Ukraine is fighting a war and everything, and it's always good to help them out, but at the same time we also have bills to pay, and if we aren't paying those bills, this show comes to an end pretty quick. So with that, I hope that addresses that the best we can, because we make it fairly clear, once again, just to make this very clear to folks, that super chats go to supporting this channel, and Sunday night fundraisers go entirely to the nonprofit that is helping out Ukraine or in other situations somewhere around the world. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Con LSA, who puts in a 10. And thank you very much, Con, as well, for that support. He said, insanity. I was stationed in Bagram for years, and this is madness. It'll take at least $2 trillion just to get the sewer system up and running again. And honestly, Con, going back to Bagram, obviously it's not good that Bagram might fall into Chinese hands. Like, that's obviously not good whatsoever. But at the same time, though, it's like the U.S. going back to Bagram after the Taliban taking it over, that seems almost impossible. The bad decisions were already made, so to reverse them seems like an uphill battle, at least. But Enforcer, what say you?
I'd have to agree. And also something I'd have to say is leaving places we're at is not a good idea. Like, just to say, like I said this on the stream, well, not on the stream, on the video I made earlier today, and to reiterate it again in a way that I think will make a little bit more sense to people, leaving places that we are at is not a good idea, because it always ends up being a bad idea in retrospect later on down the line. Like, for example, when we left Afghanistan, we're saying right now, oh, this was a mistake, we should have kept Bagram. The thing is, though, like, and I want to say this really quickly before people say, well, that was definitely not, because for some reason this is weirdly political, and a lot of people don't look at the truth of what happened and everything in between, because there's a lot of nuance to it, and also there wasn't really anyone particularly to blame. It was more so a series of bad decisions made by everyone that was involved. But the guy who said that we should get Bagram back was the guy who made the treaty with the Taliban to completely withdraw from the country and leave initially. He was the guy who started that. We would have lost Bagram either way, whether he had gotten a second term then or whether the other guy came in. We had a plan to completely leave, and Bagram was going to be left behind. We were not going to be there anymore. And what's going on right now, this is even crazier, is that we're saying, man, in retrospect, it was a mistake to give up Bagram. We should have kept it. Right now, while that's going on, U.S. forces have completely left Iraq. They're in the process of completely leaving Syria, and they're in the process of leaving any other place that we can possibly imagine leaving right now. And so in the future, I can already see it, folks, in a couple of years' time, we're also going to be saying that it was a mistake to leave the victory base at Baghdad. It was a mistake to leave the Conoco fields in Iraq. It was a mistake to leave the SDF in northeastern Syria. We're going to be saying that it was a mistake to leave all those places because they are primetime spots in the Middle East. They're all right near to Iraq. And they give us a nice little spot to be able to create an air defense perimeter towards Jordan and Israel, and for also us to be able to force project in countries that are somewhat unstable, especially Syria, which is highly unstable, and Iraq, which is generally unstable. That is something that I just don't really understand why the short-sightedness is so severe, because it's already being seen now, and you would think that lessons would be learned, and they're not going to be, that giving up Bagram was in fact a mistake, which generally I don't even know why in the world we would have left Afghanistan completely, because we've really never done that anywhere else in the world, and then we left Afghanistan completely, and now we're seeing that that wasn't a great idea. We never left Iraq completely, we never left Syria completely up until recently, and we're doing that again. And you would think that now this particular person is saying it was a mistake to leave Bagram, which technically that ball started rolling with him. You would think that he'd look at our bases in Iraq and Syria and go, okay, well, maybe it's not a good idea to completely leave Iraq and Syria, and we ought to keep our forces at least in smaller numbers there, so that way if we need to be there in the future, we already have a basing to work with and to build from. Because whenever we leave these places, we're pretty much screwing over CENTCOM. They can't go back. Once U.S. forces leave a place, it's incredibly difficult to put them back where they're from. So we would have to ask the Iraqis for permission to re-enter their country. Who knows what the political atmosphere looks like in their country right now, and whether they'd be willing to accept us back in and to the particular bases that we're at, like the Al-Assad base, or the Victory base in Iraq, or the Conoco fields. Then we'd have to figure out if the SDF is even alive in a couple of years, if we could go back into northeastern Syria, and what that's looking like. I mean, Syria might end up being Russian or Iranian aligned in the future. We don't know. So we lost that opportunity to still change the course of events in Syria, because we just no longer have any U.S. forces there at all, even on the ground, to stop anything from happening that would crush the SDF. And then in Afghanistan, we would never have stopped the collapse of the Emirate of Afghanistan's government. It was guaranteed to collapse. Everybody knew that.
Oh, yeah.
But
It wasn't going to hold up at all. It was so weak, honestly. And also, all the servicemen that came back, like from our military in the U.S., they would always come back and say, I literally heard them say it firsthand. They'd be like, "Man, the Afghanistan army is just not. They don't have it together. They don't have the fighting spirit behind them. They don't really have the desire to defend their country. They kind of just want to mind their own business." So, some guys weren't even showing up for work when they were on the payroll for the army in Afghanistan. That was how bad it was getting. So they didn't stand a chance. I think the U.S. knew they didn't stand a chance. Like when we pulled out, they predicted like a couple of months, and it turned out to be a couple of weeks because they disbanded so fast. They literally ran off.
Yeah, but you know what I was going to say, and I think this would actually ended up being a good idea, and Russia kind of proved that you can do this with what happened in Latakia, is just keep people there at Bagram and let the government, the Emirate of Afghanistan, collapse, and let the Islamic Caliphate, which is what's there now, take its place, which is the Taliban, and then just go, oh, we kind of like it here. Can we stay? And they're not going to say no, because if they say no, they're going to have to start shooting at everyone at Bagram, and then we start bombing them again. And they're going to go, okay, well, we pretty much won everything that we wanted except for Bagram, so we'll just leave that alone and let them have it. Because al-Jilani's completely dropped the issue of the Russians leaving Latakia Air Base right here, or the Menin Air Base, as it's been sometimes called. And the Russians are still there right now. Like, they're still on that air base, and it looks like they're there to stay. We could have done the same thing with Bagram and just let the Emirate of Afghanistan fall, let the Taliban run the country, and we still would be able to operate Bagram and also not be getting shot at every single day from, the Taliban just hanging out around the base all the time. So that's what it should have
I
been.
remember back when the decision was made to sign the Doha Agreement. I remember there was all that talk back in the day, back in 2020, that there was a 20-year war. We were there for too long in Afghanistan. It's time to bring the forever war to an end. Which honestly, I mean, it was a fair point. We'd have been in Afghanistan for 20 years, but to agree to pull out completely, I'm like, that implies also leaving Bagram. When you say to pull out completely, that was not a good, wise decision right there, because we should have known that China, being so close, was going to want Bagram, or they would at least try to meddle in it once the Taliban took it over, because we knew the Afghanistani forces weren't going to keep it. They just simply didn't have it in them to keep it. So the Taliban were naturally going to take it over. So now that the Taliban have it, and they have a whole bunch of our equipment too, and granted, it's stuff like Humvees and stuff like that. It's not like high-end equipment, but it's still our equipment nonetheless, and it's big numbers of it. They've gotten their hands on it, they're using it, and they can sell it to people too. So they can sell it right to our adversaries if they really wanted to.
Yeah, but luckily it wasn't anything incredibly sensitive, at least from what we heard. It's stuff that is pretty much like public access nearly at this point, like Blackhawks, Stingers, those sorts of deals. The Stingers at this point ought to be gone, though, because there is a shelf life to all of our ordnance, like live ordnance, bullets, rounds, artillery shells, all that sort of a deal. If any of that was left behind intact, at this point, its shelf life has expired, and most of that propellant, considering that it's most likely been stored improperly, has rotted, and it's no longer usable. So, luckily, that's the case, that most of the munitions are completely unusable at this point. But outside of that, also, I see a lot of people saying, well, why in the world did the Afghan government collapse? The Afghan government was bound to collapse. Any government that ever exists in Afghanistan, including the Taliban right now, is bound to collapse in a very short amount of time. It'll probably be a couple of decades from now, because Afghanistan is the armpit of the world. And that's not like saying anything against the Afghans. It's just saying that because of their geography. It is an insanely rugged and treacherous terrain. The whole country is covered in the Hindu Kush. Most of the country is the Himalayas for the pretty much. And it's incredibly high in altitude. It's impossible to create any kind of modern infrastructure in that sort of an environment. It's just next to impossible. And because of that, people up there still live like they're in the Middle Ages for the larger part in those mountains. They hardly travel. They hardly have any modern infrastructure. There's practically no industry in Afghanistan. So you'll see these villages that will have totally different languages than each other every 10 miles. They'll have totally different cultures, and that's because nobody from these villages ever travels around, because it's just so damn difficult to do that. And so it's practically a medieval world in there. And so going into Afghanistan, you have to know every single little language, you have to know every single little culture, and somehow you have to make a government that is actually benevolent enough for that all these people will get along with it, and they won't, because any sort of a difference, or even benevolence to some degree, will be met with straight hostility by a lot of these people in different tribes in Afghanistan. So any government will face resistance. Like, a lot of people don't know this. This is a very unreported thing, but the Taliban is having terrorist attacks conducted on it by other groups in Afghanistan from these small tribes and villages in the mountains and far-flung regions of the country, because they don't agree with Taliban rule, because they're either not radical enough, or they're radical in a different way that they don't agree with. So there's still little wars going on all across Afghanistan that the Taliban's having to fight, because now the Taliban has its own terrorist forces that are attacking it. So it's an endless sort of a process like that in Afghanistan. It'll never change. The only way that it'll change in Afghanistan is if somehow, like, and this is something that honestly would take over a century to be able to do. You would have to build a modern infrastructure system in Afghanistan, of modern roadways that actually connect the whole country together. You would then have to create modern public education institutions across the whole country to actually educate these folks. They're going to have to become a lot more mobile, a lot more industrialized. They're going to have to start focalizing their populations within the larger urban centers like Kabul, or in the southern regions of the country where it's a lot more flat and modern industry and logistics can be supported. And only then, and that would be an incredibly long process, because on top of that, you have to deal with the generational impact of that, of these people pretty much getting out of their like medieval ways, because that's really the only way I can explain it. It's about as decentralized in Afghanistan as Europe was in the Middle Ages. For them to be able to get up to a modern speed where this sort of a thing would be possible, for Afghanistan to have a truly centralized government and not be in an endless state of war and chaos like a medieval country. That's really the only way you can do it, and that's just far beyond the abilities of anyone. So Afghanistan generally will remain this way forever. There's really no way to do anything about this. Like, it will be like this, I would assume, 200 years from now, because there just will be no way for an Afghan government to become stable enough, at least for any time in the future, to be able to build the infrastructure and industrialize the country in a way where it modernizes, or to any extent. So that's what I would generally have to give my 2 cents on. It's an impossible sort of a scenario with that. Like, hell, like, I get, like, even better. Like, if you look at the British involvement in Afghanistan, all of the Afghan wars that the British had, they had 3 of them. And the same type of problems that they were going up in Afghanistan with were the same types of problems that the Soviets went up against in the 70s and the 80s, and the same types of problems that the Americans went through the early 2000s. Same ones. Never changes, because the country cannot change because of its geography and how difficult it is to do anything there. So, with that, I hope that does address it the best I can. A big thanks to you once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running. And I'd have to say that going back to Bagram will be a really tough thing. If they somehow negotiate a way to get access to Bagram, that's going to be really shocking. But in the meantime, I have a feeling that's just lost to the pages of history, and we'll probably never get it back. So, a big thanks to you once again, and we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one here goes to Danny B. And Danny, it's good to see you once again. He puts in a $25 support, and thank you very much, Chef, for that support. He said, "Good evening, Enforcers. Chef Danny here. And in your opinions, how long would a war with Venezuela really last in LLT LSA?" And Danny, if we're talking about strikes, like precision strikes on the Venezuelan Maduro regime by the United States military, I would say generally about 2 weeks. And that's not a joke, by the way. I'm being serious about that. Generally about 2 weeks or so, you'll probably see strikes over that period. They'll probably strike multiple different sites, including government sites, air defenses, and things like that. And then there will probably be a standoff period after that, where we basically see how the Maduro regime is going to respond to it, or if they start falling apart, basically, and see if basically the regime collapses after those strikes. So that's what I think it's going to look like, in my personal opinion. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say not long. If we are conducting an airstrike campaign, it truly would only last for weeks. If we're conducting a ground invasion of Venezuela, possibly months at that point, but it wouldn't be incredibly long. I have a feeling that the kind of governmental resistance that would be posed in Venezuela would be similar to that in Panama during Operation Just Cause, and for that reason, any sort of resistance would generally melt away after a couple of weeks, and then it would be a peacekeeping operation from then until we left, after we had created an interim government inside the country that was American aligned. So in any way, in any sense, ground invasion or airstrikes, it wouldn't be an incredibly long sort of a conflict. But with that, I do thank you for the support, and also great to see you again, official chef of the LSA. It's good to have you here, and I hope you've been cooking, and good food, hopefully, too. I'm kind of hungry at this point. And I gotta be honest with y'all, folks. The last time I went to a restaurant that served wings, there was a lot of sauce on the wings, and this time there was none. They were so dry. It was like eating wings with no sauce, which was very sad.
No sauce. You can't, yeah, you got to have sauce. Listen, you have to have sauce, but you also can't get lost in the sauce. That's the problem number 2. But the problem is, if you have no sauce, that chicken's like freaking sandpaper at that point. That chicken is dry. And that chicken today was dry that we had. So dry, I probably won't ever get it again, honestly. There was 0 sauce on that chicken.
I've never seen such little sauce, folks. It was literally a chicken that was a chicken that was as dry as most very political people's intelligence. It was very dry, and I was like, man, it's like, this is tough to eat. Like, and also I got like a really spicy spice, and well, at least that's what it was supposed to be, and there was like none of it. So it wasn't even really that tasty, because you just get like this little hint of spice from the sauce, and there was like nothing. Rather than that, it was just chicken itself. And I was like, what in the hell? I was like, this is just terrible. And then I got some, y'all are going to know what restaurant this is at this point, but I also got some cheese curds. The cheese curds were actually great, to be honest, Matthew, but the wings were terrible. Like, absolutely terrible. If I get wings again, I'm going to another place than that, because the wings today were dry. But anyway.
Yeah, I'll be honest with you. Speaking of dry wings, honestly, man, let's go ahead and see if we can. We could pre-order food from Venezuelan restaurants when the United States finally takes it over. We could place our pre-orders now and pick it up later when they get done with everything. So, what kind of restaurants they got in the capital of Venezuela down there? Can we see what they got like cooking in the capital city in Caracas?
Let's see here. Caracas. Let's see here. They got this one. It's a coffee shop.
Oh,
That serves hot dogs.
A little bit of something. That's a man. I'll tell you, hot dogs and coffee. I love that combo. You gotta love that.
And wings, chicken tenders with fries, maybe. I don't know. Powdered bread.
They're doing Pepsi. This is the sole reason we're invading right here. Is they didn't choose Coke, they choose Pepsi. This is what did it in.
Let's see here. What other restaurants do they have? They have this one, La Magia de Pan. Or La Magia del Pan. So,
yeah, not too bad looking. They got empanadas though. I mean, they're known for empanadas. So, I mean, isn't that like a thing? Don't they sell that anywhere in here?
I wonder. They got a lot of pastry shops. This must be why Maduro is a little fatty, because they got a lot of these things. Like, oh look, they finally have a burger store. And
those burgers are not looking that great. Why is the bun rectangle or square? Why is it sitting on the fries?
What is this?
Oh, that's the Devils. What the hell is this? That's just scary.
That is the founder of Venezuela. I think that's Bolivar himself.
Interesting. This is some very like
is that Osama bin Laden?
It can't be. I'll just say mama next to it.
Oh, mama. What in the hell?
No.
Who is this guy?
Is that Elvis?
I don't even know.
I'll say Jose alive. What is this crap? Was somebody on something when they did this?
Who the hell is this? It says Mahoma. That ain't no Mahoma. that ain't no Mahoma.
Is that Dick Cheney over there?
Where?
Off to the right.
Right here?
Yeah, maybe that's Dick Cheney. I mean, I don't know.
I have no clue. I have no clue at all. But we do have, let's see. Who in there? Yes. Mary Magdalene. Oh, no. Sorry. Who is that? Like, I forgot their name.
That looked like a dude.
Oh my god. We're gonna get flamed for that one. We're gonna get flamed for that one. There's no.
I'm saying the drawing looked like a dude.
I forgot who that is, but it's fairly important. Mother Teresa, that's who it is. Mother Teresa.
No, come on, man. You're setting me up. I wasn't talking about that one. I was talking about the one. I thought you were talking about the one to the right of it.
Oh no, I don't know what the hell
man,
that
don't
is.
set me up like that. I wasn't trying to diss on Mother Teresa. Come on, now I wasn't pointing to that one.
That's Mother Teresa, but I don't know who the hell the guy on the right is. Also, who the hell is this? Why are they golden?
I don't know.
And also, this guy does not look like... What?
Is that Guy Fieri?
I have no clue. Honestly, man, that looks like the older guy who did The Shining, you know? Like, that guy. I forgot his name, though, but...
Stanley Kubrick?
No, it was the actor in the movie, not the director. Like, it was the other guy, but...
Oh. Why do they like setting the burgers on the fries? They do that with every dish at this place. They set everything on the fries. Like, they're supposed to like not set them on top of that.
These burgers do not look good at all. Let's see here. What about some...
I'm still looking for the empanada store.
We have a pizza store. Ew.
What the?
Ew.
Pile of rubbish.
A pile of rubbish. What the hell is this shit?
What the hell is this junk piled high? They're piling this junk high too. Oh, there's some chicken.
Oh, dude, this looks like vomit.
Oh, wow. Ugh, that's nasty as hell. Man, I don't think Venezuela. This is what authoritarianism does to your food. It takes the food down like 10 notches.
This is literally raw meat on cheese.
Yeah.
What the? Ew. God.
Oh my god.
What's up the street?
What the hell is that? Is that a pig?
That looks like a piece of chicken.
Oh.
Okay, that's a somewhat normal burger.
Hamburger right there. Looks like some checkers.
Slabs
This is just like
meat.
pieces of meat.
Pieces of meat. Where do they source them? Don't ask. Some wings that look like they might be okay. Another piece of chicken. these really bad looking sliders with half the tomato in each of them. That's a tomato slider
Man.
right there.
This looks like some stuff I'd put together if I was like desperate to like throw something together real quick. I'd put something like this on the plate. Not anything to be proud of, but they're serving it. I bet this stuff costs a lot too. You know, Venezuela with their like nearly communist policies are like causing everybody to go broke pretty bad. So I'm sure this stuff's expensive.
Well, here's the prices. And I think
Is that USD?
I think that might be USD. Let's see, Venezuelan currency. Oh, I spelled it wrong. Currency. The Venezuelan bolivar, so to USD. They don't even have the currency calculator on Google for this.
Punch in like one Venezuelan bolivar to USD.
So 1 Venezuelan bolivar is equivalent to less than a penny. It's 0.6 of a penny.
So you got to be a millionaire in Venezuela to buy one perilla or whatever that thing was on the menu.
So let's do the math, folks, because if that is okay, so hold up, folks, hold up. We got to do the numbers here. So how in the world will we even do this, Matthew? How in the world will we even begin to figure out how many bolivars are equivalent?
So that thing on the menu was $3. So let's see here. Let me take the 0.00. How many zeros was in front of that? Go back to that translation. That's 2 zeros. So let's see, times let's see here. That's so $3 here. Wait a minute, I think I'm doing this backwards. Hold on. Times 100. Hell, I don't know. I'm not good at math. Like I'm just going to like skip this right here.
It would take a lot of money to buy anything.
There you go. It would take a shitload of money to buy this perilla.
How much does the average Venezuela? How many bolivars does a Venezuelan make a month? So
they 130 of them. $3.50. Are they serious about that?
Apparently. So I don't think
$3.50 a month.
Some professionals earn $200 to $300 a month, folks. You can actually make it down there.
Damn, that's what communist does. The communist policies. That's what they do for you right there. They fix you up nicely.
I gotta be honest with y'all. That's pretty rough. I think that's about as much as a North Korean makes a month, is like $3.50. Like
I think that might be less.
I think that's far less actually, because well, actually not quite, because a professional in North Korea makes $1 a day. So they make like $30 a month, and the professionals in Venezuela are making about $200 to $300. So I think it's still better off than North Korea. And I got to be honest with y'all, folks, the bots that are coming in here are absolutely crazy at this point.
Honestly, man, like obviously I don't promote illegal activities. I'm not doing that. But at the same time, though, I understand why Venezuelans are so desperate to get into that illegal trade that they're doing right now, because like you really can't survive with that. Like even in Venezuela, you can't survive with that. No wonder they're desperate.
So the thing is, though, Matthew, that's a little bit confusing about this is that they use the dollar symbol for the bolivar. But at the same time, we don't know if this is in U.S. dollars because, the bolivar is practically worthless. So I would bet you that there would be a big market for buying and selling in U.S. dollars. So we don't know if this menu is in U.S. dollars or bolivars. So that would make a big difference because if they're
I think it's bolivars now that I think about it, because surely it wouldn't cost a whole month's salary to get one piece of food.
Well, even still, the main item on the menu is $13. So if you're spending 13 bolivars, if that's what that is still 10% of your monthly salary for one meal.
Yeah, you really got to be rich to eat takeout.
And it looks like shit. Like it doesn't even look that
looks
good.
Okay. Like the ribs look okay, but this little slider thing right here is you can slide right into the garbage can.
Okay, so one more before we move on. One more.
They got the empanada store. I want to see the empanada store desperately.
What is this?
That is a military museum.
Hey, that's
They're not eating cannonballs.
Bruh, the National Guard. Wow, cool.
Punch in empanada store in Caracas. I want to see these.
Oh, we found one.
Oh, look, we found it.
They're
now that actually looks good. That might be what the hell is up with these bots tonight, man? I mean, geez, there's another one doing that right there. Also, by the way, talking about save free speech, talking about sending a bad message, like coming in here and trying to drown out other people when you're spamming like that. That's what you call knocking off free speech right there. That's a bad move.
Honestly, that's how you make the worst argument to save free speech, is being an annoying asshole with it, honestly. Like, it has a point, but at the same time, being an annoying asshole about that isn't really helping out the case too much, so, thanks. Anyways, what is this? Oh. This costs like
Oh, they got
5
that
million.
leche.
Bro, they got that.
Here it is again.
There
They're
it
back.
is
Look.
again. Jeez. You know, man, honestly, like, I wish YouTube could catch that quicker. I don't even know how they're doing that, man. It's like a denial of service thing because they're coming in at literally like 100 a second.
It's some type of like automated script or something because that's going way too fast, like submitting that. But Nightbot's getting it pretty quick now. It's come in and hit the manual ban button.
You know something else I'm interested in, Matthew? Speaking of this place, speaking of Caracas and everything, San Bernardino. They have a San Bernardino. Huh.
Oh, look at that truck right there they got on the back of that thing. That's like a Ford F-250.
Can't play the clip, sadly, but interesting. I didn't know they had one of those. Let's see. Let's look at an average. Do they have a grocery store? This is a mall. So let's see here. Huh. Well, the mall doesn't look too bad, but I bet you everything's unaffordable here. So, you know, you're all just kind of working to get a salary and not buy anything. So, a little bit crazy.
I got a little way to fix up that bot, by the way. Watch this. I'm about to fix them up with this little one simple trick here that the doctors don't want you to hear about. Let's see here. Slow mode. You have to wait 10 seconds. That'll fix them up. Here we go. Watch this. Look at that. That's going to mess them up. Even with the script, they can't get around that.
Oh, man, that's about to really cramp their style. That's about to cramp it pretty bad. But anyways, with that, folks, we are on to the next one.
All right, so our next one here is going to go to none other than Arar983, who puts in a $20 donation. And thank you very much, Arar, for that support as well. He said Pizza Fund, LSA, and Slav Ukraine.
And thank you for the pizza fund. We're definitely going to need it because I'm getting really hungry right now. And I got to thank you massively for support and helping this channel to keep on running. Because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to make this channel possible and keep it running. So a massive thanks to you so much once again. And we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Breesicles, who puts in a 10. And they said, thoughts on the future Russian demobilization between the job loss from no war economy and the inability to support returned traumatized conscripts and pardoned criminals. It seems like a recipe for disaster.
It's guaranteed a recipe for disaster. That's actually something that we've been talking about here on the channel, is that they really will not be able to survive post-war industry or post-war economy, and that may actually lead to a collapse of its own anyways, even if they somehow try to stabilize the economic situation, which is also impossible at this point as well. So they're doomed either way. So I do thank you for the support and helping this channel to keep on running, and I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And we have a $10 support from Silence. And Silence said, good evening to you. And what do you two think of diversifying your brand a bit by starting a dedicated debate channel in Discord? That sounds interesting, but the only catch is, Silence, the only things we can really debate, honestly, it's really mainly like 80% politics at that point, because that's the stuff that's really debatable. The other war stuff is like maybe 20%. There's like 20% of stuff you could debate about the wars, but not a whole bunch. Mainly it's all political, so that would probably cause a lot more destruction than it would be constructive when it comes to the channel. So that's probably why we wouldn't do it. But Enforcer, what do you think?
Yeah, I would have to say it's a cool idea. I think it would be neat to do, and I think it'd be pretty fun, really. But there's a bit of an issue with that, is that one, we're apolitical, so there starts to be a bit of an issue there, because that starts to have a conflict of interest, because to actually have interesting debates that people want to listen to, they're most likely going to be political, and that would conflict with our current brand. And secondly, another issue is that a lot of people don't really debate, at least in the traditional sense of debate. And a lot of people wouldn't even want to listen to that either, because a lot of people in the modern day, they have this really weird way of debating. You see, I actually listen to these folks, and there's a really famous sort of format that's going around right now called the 1 person versus 20, where one person who's one thing debates 20 people of another. And I'll be honest with y'all, some of the worst takes are had in that. Like, there was one time, I'll sit there and just, like, be a little bit upfront with which one I was watching, but it was one guy versus 20 people who were incredibly far leaning in one direction. And I listened to the guy, and he went up against these people, and I was like, oh, well, you know, I mean, these people do sound a little crazy. But like he sounds like he might be a little bit reasonable. Let me look into him a little bit. And then I looked into him, and the guy was also absolutely crazy as well, saying stuff like, Iran has no way to make a nuclear weapon, and everyone's lying saying that they are. And I'm like, okay, you're just stupid then. Like, there's literal insurmountable proof that they are working on one. You have to literally be blind and stupid to not think that they're working on one. And I was like, okay, well, this guy doesn't even know what the hell he's talking about. They just set him up to make him look okay. And then there was another guy who said, what makes you think I'm even a Christian? And I'm like, well, it's like, well, that's kind of the whole reason of the debate. So, that's a little bit weird and kind of a little bit of an odd question to ask in the middle of the debate. So I was looking at that and I was like, really, that and also on top of that, to make it interesting, you pretty much make it to where when people are quote unquote debating, it's not even debating. Both sides are dead on entrenched into what they're saying, and everyone's just trying to throw gotchas at each other. So they'll sit there and say something like, I heard you're afraid of spiders. Does that mean you support, a genocide in Gaza? And it's like, it doesn't even make any sense. It's just people trying to throw out lame gotchas just to see if they can get the other person caught up in something. And I'm like, that's not even really debating. This is not, and also everyone's so disingenuous with how they debate. Like if we brought on guests to debate, because it get pretty old just listening to Matthew and me debate stuff over and over, because we have like the same debating style and generally the same sort of standpoints that we're coming from to come up with our forums. So you would, of course,
heat it up a little bit.
Well, we could maybe, but we would have to make it fresh, so we'd have to eventually bring on other people, and most people just don't debate in a genuine way. It's always a disingenuous gotcha sort of a thing. And that's how a lot of people think that modern debates are supposed to go. And just to be entirely honest, as far as like the classical format of a debate, it's not really substantive. It's not really discovering anything. Everyone's already got their side picked, and it's not really debating points to see if they have any merit or not. It's debating points to win. And that's the concept of the debate from the outset. So it isn't even a debate; it's an argument. But still,
You just can't debate today. Like today, it's impossible to debate. It's too partisan today. People are too divided. I saw literally like the recent like polling data and things like that. People are more divided today than they've literally ever been, according to polling data. Now they are so far apart that it's astonishing how far apart people are. Mainly thanks to the rise of social media. That appears to be the correlation with it. So yeah, no more debates. Sadly, anytime there's a debate, it usually goes really sideways because people hear something they don't want to hear, and usually they've like embedded themselves in a cult at that point. So the moment they hear something they don't want to hear, they go crazy. Like there's no hope in hell that they're actually going to like debate fairly at all.
Yeah, like earlier today when I made my video, I got loads of pushback on multiple topics in the video. It was crazy to me. I said about Bagram, what we were saying on air a little while ago. I was like, well, like the current administration started the withdrawal, so it's a little bit weird that we're saying that we want Bagram because technically we're going to leave it anyways. And and then a whole bunch of people wanted to get on my ass because clearly the United States Taliban deal or the Qatar treaty didn't exist. It was just whatever they wanted it to be. And then a bunch of other people. So, by the way, just to make it a little bit clear, those were all the people who were the right-leaning people who were attacking me over that topic. Then a whole bunch of left-leaning people were attacking me over the topic of the Coast Guard seizing the low-visibility vessel off the Baja Peninsula, because they didn't even connect that had nothing to do with Venezuela. That was just anti-narcotics activities from the Coast Guard. And they started attacking me for saying I support an illegal war against Venezuela. So you can't even get close to touching those topics because a lot of people don't even have the mental wavelength to even listen to anything at all. They immediately go into like this peasant-like brain dead like herky jerk response, like they got electrocuted, like they're just sitting there going damn you, like that's their like response instantly is that. And you can't even talk about anything because half of everyone's wanting to kill you at that point. Like it's like case in point is the modern environment with anyone who actually does talk about that sort of stuff. It's practically deadly these days for most people who get involved in it because people can't even handle listening to something they disagree with. And that's not one side, that's both. Because we like before someone tells us that it's not, we are an actual talking voice that it does get a decent amount of attention on the internet. We were top 30 on YouTube yesterday, and I can tell y'all that there are a lot of violent people from all sides. The right-wing people are extremely violent, and the left-wing people are extremely violent, and they will threaten you with death just because they disagree with you on anything. It's just wild how that works, but they will. And so that's why I don't even want to really get involved in it too much, because there's just too many damn crazy people out there to even have a legitimate discussion about anything. But
I just
anyways,
wouldn't. I wouldn't want. I love debating. Like that's one thing I do like. That's part of the reason why I actually was like slightly excited about law school until I found out how it really worked. And I was like, this is not what I was thinking it was at all. But I like to debate. That's one thing I do like. But the catch is though, anybody that you see, like for example on YouTube, that are like the so-called debaters that want to go around debating people, I would personally never debate 90% of them because most of them are just looking for the gotcha, and you really can't get anywhere with that. Like you're not going to change people's mind with that. If you're debating just for a good show, it might work. But if you're debating for the reason of actually trying to exchange ideas and the hope that the other person might see your side a little bit better, there's no hope of that. None of these people on YouTube are interested in that. It's just a bunch of rage baiting, clip farming, and things like that. It's hopeless. But honestly, though. But anyways, jumping into our next one here, this one goes to Silence once again. And Silence puts in a 10. And thank you very much, Silence, as well. They said, also, when is the next merch drop? And I want to get some for when I inevitably get drafted for World War III. And also, do you think there will ever be a conventional war to end all wars, or will human nature continue?
Human nature will continue. There will never be a war to end all wars. There will always be a war of some type. And it's an unfortunate thing to hear, but it's the truth. No war that ever was supposed to end all the wars ever ended them. They just keep happening. But as far as merch drops, we don't really know. We're planning on starting up merch drops once we get out to Enforcer HQ 3.0 in Salt Lake. But we don't really know when that will be after we get out there and how that will work just yet. So we have to figure all that out first, but it will be several months from now at a minimum. But I do thank you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep on running, and hopefully we can avoid World War III. I'm hoping, but who knows? The future is very uncertain, but hopefully we'll be able to push through and make it to the other side. And so with that, a big thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Green Skin, who puts in a 5. And thank you very much, Green, for that support, and we do appreciate that. And we also have a 5 from Pat Powell, and thank you very much, Pat, as well. They said, thanks, guys, and pick a good question from the chat in LSA.
Hey, and we will make sure to get one from the chat, Pat. And I got to thank you for the support. And Matthew, what do we got for Pat?
And this one goes to Pump, who said, did the French send ships to the Caribbean?
They actually do have a patrol vessel down there, but it's not in support of our operations. It's just kind of like a sightseeing venture for them. So yes, they do, but it's not a part of our deal. But I do hope that does address that well, and a big thanks to Pat for sponsoring our live chat and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Aiden Coate, who puts in a 5. And he said, do you think boots on the ground is a possibility in Venezuela, or just airstrikes?
I have a feeling that airstrikes are a guarantee at this point, but boots on the ground is a little bit hard to say. It really depends on how the airstrikes go. If the airstrikes don't really achieve much, I can pretty much guarantee you the boots on the ground will probably be next. If the airstrikes achieve what we're looking for, it'll probably just stop there. So I hope that does address that the best I can. A big thanks to you once again for support and help with this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And we have a 5 from Elphany, who said, the France sent Rafale fighter jets to Poland. Do you happen to know if they moved nukes with the Rafales?
They didn't move nukes with them. It's all conventional at the moment, and those Rafale are actually based out of this airbase right here, which is blurred out for security reasons, but they're at this airbase. Also notice, folks, you can tell that the world's getting close to war because YouTube, Google Maps is starting to blur out the air bases in NATO countries. That used to not be done. Now it's being done. It's starting to show something a little bit obvious at this point. Like if we go down here, you can see this airfield is also now blurred out completely as well. All of them are blurred out. Like if we go to Germany,
couldn't they just go and get that same satellite data from a third-party company though?
Technically they could, but just for Google's sake, they're blurring them out now. But that's clearly starting to show what kind of tensions are rising in the area, because now Google is just blanket blurring any airbase that's near to Russia at this point that is in NATO. But if you look at the Russian ones, they're not blurred out. They're not blurred out.
That's nice.
You can literally see everything in perfect high definition. So, not that this is incredibly up to date. Like this gets updated, I think every few weeks or something like that in some areas. But
The sad part is if a country is using Google Maps for their intelligence, then they're in foul shape because other countries that are really well equipped and have big budgets can literally zoom in and see scratches on an airplane with their technology. But if you're using Google Maps for your government intelligence, maybe North Korea might be doing that, but nobody else is.
yeah, also let me show you this. This will be a little bit interesting. Let's go to, see, it'd be north of Cambridge, somewhere up here, Lakenheath. Yeah, this is Lakenheath. Lakenheath isn't blurred out because it's not really in a security danger zone in a sense. So they haven't blurred this one out yet. So you can actually see all the cool little gadgets that we have, like this F-15E, this F-15 that was actually taxiing off of the runway, and all these F-15s as well, and also this aggressor F-15 that's in a really interesting camo right there. That's pretty cool and kind of rare. But they have all of that not blurred out. But if you go over to say Lithuania, and we try and look at an airfield in Lithuania, these are also not blurred out because they're commercial airfields. And this is where the caveat comes in. The Baltic states don't have air forces, neither do they really have any air bases that can support air forces. So I was wondering, I was like, are these going to be blurred out? And they're not. But if you go to any country that does have, for example, an air force, like, for example, down here, let's go to Rejow, blurred out again. So a little interesting with that. But anyways, I hope that points that out. That's another telltale sign things are starting to get pretty tense for airports to start getting blurred out like that on Google Maps. But with that, it's time for us to move on to the next one.
All right, so moving on to our next one here. This one is going to go to Show Nuff Jr., who puts in a 5. And he said, I hope all is well, and I've passed a short ASVAB and MEPS, and
Hey.
practicing the longer one for the Marines, and then the real till boot camp at San Diego.
And you're going to have a fun time. I hope you enjoy the Marines. The Marines is a great branch and a great service with a deep and interesting history. And you'll get to go to great places like 29 Palms and Okinawa, like the Cadena Air Base in Okinawa, and Puerto Rico. You get to see the world in the Marines, really. Honestly, the Marines is not a bad branch to be in if you really do want to see the world, because they actually do get sent everywhere. Like, the Marines have a higher chance of being sent everywhere than anyone else, really, at least on the ground. So you actually will get to see a little bit of the world in the Marines, and I hope that that turns out well for you, and a big congratulations to you, and a big thanks to you for the support and helping this channel to keep on running as well. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one here goes to none other than Clayton Welke, who puts in a 5. And he said, good day, enforcers. How far are the Ukraine forces to the Russian borders in kilometers? And are they pushing them? And Clayton from Brisbane, Queensland, Australia. LSA rules.
And hello to Brisbane in Queensland, Australia. Ah, that's a cool city. Take a look. Oh, wow. Beautiful. Really beautiful. Oh. They have like little tide pools and stuff. That's actually really cool looking. Honestly, I would like to go to Australia one day. It looks like a cool place.
I'd like to go to Australia and see all the deadly animals.
Is that a Eurocopter Tiger?
Hey,
Shoot, it is. That's crazy. That is so cool. They actually had a little demonstration there. That's pretty neat. Honestly, Australian cities always look really nice. But beyond that, as far as the Ukrainians being close to the border, in most of the active fronts, they're not really close at all. And also near any border areas, they're not really pushing across the borders. But in the Sumy front, they are gaining some ground near Kindrativka and Oleksivka. But beyond that, we're not really seeing much in the realm of that area, or much in terms of border changes or actions. So I hope that does address it the best I can. A big thanks to you once again for support and helping this channel to keep running. And we are on to the next one.
and up next, a big shout out to 1984 Bald Man, and he puts in a 10, and thank you very much, good sir, for that support as well. He said, hello from Arkansas, and do either one of you watch Baltic Defense Review by any chance? And they cover the 3 Baltic nations and their armed forces, as well as some vids about the NATO forces over there. And for me personally, I actually don't watch too many other YouTube channels in our same category. I usually try to not watch them because I don't want to copy things they're saying, and I don't want to sound like I'm repeating the same talking points. So to keep it fresh and force ourselves to come up with original analysis, I usually don't watch those channels. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to agree with Enforcer Man on that. I actually hide in the hole when I'm not doing this. I don't listen to anyone else because whenever you listen to someone else, like by default, psychologically, you'll start to parrot their talking points because your brain is going to do the easiest thing that it knows. And if it heard something, it's going to just repeat it. So I completely avoid listening to other folks in our categories. So that way, everything that we say is original and actually thought up by us more so than just kind of like parroting or copying someone else's talking points. And that's why we get copycatted a lot, because we're one of the few people in the category who come up with original ideas. There are a couple others out there, but not a lot. Like if you look at the whole category, I'd say like maybe 25 to 30% of folks are coming up with real original ideas, thoughts, and analysis, and the other 75 to 70% are just copying those folks and just saying their talking points like they're theirs. Like that's really kind of how it works. So I generally avoid ever listening to anyone else in the category, and I would have to say that unfortunately I haven't listened to them. Not to say that their content's bad, but it's just that I haven't listened to them myself. But still, a big thanks to you once again for support and helping this channel to keep running, and I hope that does address that the best that we can. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Traditional Salmon, who puts in the 20. And thank you very much, Traditional Salmon, as well, for supporting the channel. He said, VMI friend thinks that is unlikely. We will not be going into World War III, and he will be going Marines soon. And currently, I'm in line going for a Ranger position, and I'm pretty sure Russia wouldn't. A test us to keep us at bay, question mark?
And the Virginia Military Institute in Lexington, Virginia. The Battle of the Lost Shoes, I believe, happened around this military institute during the Civil War, if I'm not mistaken. But I could be corrected if I'm wrong. But there it is, VMI. It looks like a castle on the outside, and it's a dormitory on the inside. You can really see that
Looks
here.
like a factory.
Honestly, it kind of does. The VMI doesn't really have the external aura of West Point, but it does have a really nice interior to its buildings. They're pretty cool. But beyond that, there was actually a time, folks, that I was actually offered, crazily enough, you'll remember this, Matthew, to go to VMI.
VMI? You were offered to go to VMI?
Remember by the representative, I played the bagpipes, and they're like, you could get a bagpipe scholarship to VMI.
Oh, okay. Was it to here?
Yeah, it was to here, actually. This is VMI. It was to this place.
Oh.
And then it turned out I got scoliosis, and I couldn't do that at all. So that went away really quick. But still, it's a neat thing. And I would have to say that World War is coming around. Like the idea that the Russians wouldn't be stupid enough to do something, at least in practice these days, isn't really standing up too well. The Russians are stupid enough to do stuff. The Russians are stupid enough to invade Ukraine. The Russians have been stupid enough to keep that going for 3.5 years. The Russians are also stupid enough that they fired an IRBM and a Reshnik at Ukraine a while ago. The Russians are also stupid enough that they have started to fly drones into Poland and other countries trying to provoke them. They are stupid enough to start invading Western countries in NATO. It would be absolutely terrible for them and how that would turn out, but they are dumb enough to be able to do that. And on top of that, with how bad the situation is in Russia, they may have really no other choice when it comes to it rather than to push forward with possibly starting a larger conflict with NATO in hopes that they would be able to get concessions out of the threat of nuclear conflict coming out of that conventional war. But still, I do thank you for support, Traditional Salmon. And I also have to say, that is very interesting here that you're in line for a Ranger position. That's really cool, and I hope that you get it. And so a big thanks to you once again for support. I hope that does address that well. And also, some people are like, wow, Enforcer plays the bagpipes. I did it a time. I haven't played them in years, but at one point, I actually played the bagpipes a pretty good bit. And I was told by some folks that I was actually pretty dang good at it. Honestly, though, I did a lot of things that you weren't supposed to do as a bagpiper that made it a lot easier to play. So that's kind of why. So I didn't really focus on technique too much. It was more so like function over form. And so that's why some people were like, wow, that sounds really good. And I was like, yeah, that's because I'm not doing all the other stuff that some other people do that makes this really difficult. But beyond that, at the time I was a bagpiper, and I generally ended up, which is kind of lame, bagpiping at a lot of funerals. And at first it was funerals of folks I didn't know, and then it was funerals of folks that I knew. And the last time I played the bagpipes, it was for someone that I knew, and it kind of brought me down a little bit on playing the bagpipes. And I was like, I really don't like playing the bagpipes because I'm just playing it nowadays for when folks I know die, and that was really one of the last times I ever really played it, and that was a long time ago. Yeah, I played the bagpipes in time, still have them around, but haven't played them in the longest of times. But anyways, With that, I hope that's a new factoid that y'all have about the Enforcer. I play the bagpipes. I also play the accordion and the balalaika and a couple of other little instruments, but haven't played most of them in years. But anyways, with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one goes to Clayton Wilkie, who puts in a 5. And thank you very much, Clayton, as well, for that support. He said, "Good
Hey!
day again. And I went to the shops to buy myself coffee, and I forgot to buy the coffee, so I put in 5 for your coffee fund, as I blame old age. Did I forget?"
Oh, it's all right. And I thank you for the support to the coffee fund. We need the support because it helps us to get fresh beans. And we love fresh beans, coffee beans. We grind them up and put them in our coffee. Well, not in our coffee, but in a coffee filter. And then we percolate the coffee. So I got to thank you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep on running, because it is folks like you help us to have a little sip of coffee and keep the show running every day. So big thanks to you once again. And we are on to the next one.
And a very big shout out to Bob Hudak, who just put in a $50 donation right now. And thank you very much, Bob, for that $50 support right there. We do appreciate it. He said, "Back again for great info, as always."
Hey, thank you so much for the support, Bob Hudak. And thank you for enjoying the great info, as always. We're happy to know that you do. And we're happy to know that you're back and enjoying it here tonight. And so a huge thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that quite well indeed. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right. And also, by the way, a big shout out to Tia Beery LSA, by the way, who just put in a $100 donation through a different PayPal method there. And thank you very much, Tia Beery, for that support, by the way. And a huge shout out to you for the kind words as well. But Enforcer, what say you?
I gotta thank you massively for the support and throwing in a little bit of support to the channel and helping this thing to keep on running. We're massively appreciative of that. And I thank you greatly, because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to keep this thing rolling. So a humongous thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that incredibly well. And with that, it's time for us to move on into the next one.
And our next one goes to WS, who puts in a 5. They said LTLSA got that iron in them for the pizza, coffee, and moving fund.
Hey, and I thank you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And I thank you for helping out that pizza and coffee fund. We need it. We need it. I'm getting hungry right now. I'm getting hungry, and oh goodness, I gotta have some. And so with that, huge thanks to you so much once again. And with that, also I saw Nate K say, when I was in the high school's pipe band, every year we got to make custom T-shirts for casual band stuff. My favorite was bagpipes puts the fun in funeral. Oh man, yeah, that's something. That's something right there. I remember the first time that I was ever paid to play bagpipes at a funeral. I was still in high school, and I went to the funeral parlor, and you know the morticians are great people. They're very nice. But they were like, "Oh, you need somewhere to practice?" And I was like, "Yeah." They're like, "Here, let's take you." So like, they brought me to like the morgue, like where the bodies were kept, like in the little like cabinets, and like around there. And I would like, I think technically it wasn't that area, but they had like the little body drawer things in the walls, and that was really off-putting to me, because this was the first time I was playing a bagpipe at a funeral anywhere, and I was like, I don't know what the hell I'm doing down here, but I don't like it. Like, I was like, I don't like this at all. I feel like one of these cabinets is about to move. Like, it's about to start opening or something. I was like, I don't want that at all. But yeah, another thing that's kind of interesting is that some people love the bagpipe deal that I was doing, and some people absolutely hated it. And it was an interesting sort of a thing. Because people who loved it a lot. But people who didn't like it, they didn't like it at all. Like one time there was a inspection thing that went on, and I ended up playing these bagpipes at this inspection thing for the JROTC, and it turns out that the guy said that the piper's uniform was a Halloween costume, and I was like, well, I don't really know, because it's like, doesn't every single military institute in the country have a piping band? It's like, are they wearing a Halloween costume?
They were ignorant.
Yeah, like they were ignorant. I was like, that's so stupid, because you could sit there and wear like nearly a cheerleader outfit somehow, and that was approved. But then a bagpiper's uniform was apparently a Halloween costume. I was like, no, that is really stupid. I was like, I've never heard of that. And I mean, like, I got mine down as close as I could to a piper's uniform that would have been seen at any military institute like West Point or VMI or anything like that. And then it got called a Halloween costume. I was like, that's a little stupid. But anyways, with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to NK Production. Excuse me, who puts in a 5. And thank you very much, NK Production. They said, stop complaining about the sauce. North Korea doesn't have sauce. Hell, we don't have chickens either. But jokes aside, Kim loves you. Well, I'm sure he does. And you guys are the best.
Hey, I think for support, I gotta say, we are fortunate to have some sauce. North Korea has no sauce. The only man who has sauce in that country is Kim, and he hoards all of the sauce. He is the obese man of the country. He's the big man. Like, literally. Like, he's the big man, literally. But still, a huge thanks to you for the support and helping this channel to keep running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And we have a $10 support from Neiman Bauer, and he said, "Good morning, enforcers, and I hope you're doing good. And times are crazy, and I hope the U.S. individuals will wake up and see the what's going on out there." And also, he said, "I forgot to add that. Enjoy your stream, made out of snow."
Hey, and thank you for enjoying our stream, made of snow. And I gotta thank you so much for enjoying this channel and helping it to keep rolling, because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to keep it rolling. So a big thanks to you for the compliment and the praise, and hopefully we will act accordingly like we should be, hopefully here in the future. But a big thanks to you once again. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And up next, a big shout out to Robert Krogan, War Ghost Squad, and Plazat for each putting in a $4 and $3 donations right there. And thank you all three, Robert, War Ghost, and Plazat, very much for that support. And we also have a 2 from LSA Sergeant Figment yet again. And he said, LSA, hit that like button. It's an order.
And hit that like button, folks. That is an order from none other than LSA Sergeant Figment. We've gotten up to 3.6 thousand likes tonight. Not too bad. Not too shabby. And I gotta thank you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep rolling. And with that, we are on to the next. Also, I saw someone say, who dislikes a bagpiper? Some people are really opinionated about instruments, weirdly enough. Like, some people love accordion, some people hate accordion, some people love bagpipes, some people hate bagpipes. Like, I just kind of learned that that was kind of like what came with the territory. But I don't know what, like, I'll be honest with y'all, like, looking back at everything now, some people are really peasant brained, like, when it comes to it, because they act like the instrument's you, and then they act like they have to hate you because you play a bagpipe or an accordion or something. And that is like, I don't know how in the world people mentally work like that, because it's like, if you don't like the instrument, doesn't mean you have to dislike the person. But, you know, you'd be like, oh, I play the bad, hey, you bastard. And I'm like, it's not like I'm conducting a crime here. It's an instrument. It's like, what the hell is this? But anyways, I hope that addressed that the best I can. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And up next, a big shout out to Lumi and Marc-Andre Burnett for each putting in a $2 support, and we appreciate the both of you, Lumi and Mark, very, very much. We also have a 2 from Seth Rutherford, who said LSA from Fort Gordon, Georgia, and love y'all's coverage.
Hey, and thank you so much for support from Fort Gordon, Georgia. And a big thanks to you for enjoying our coverage and helping us to keep it rolling. And so with that, we're on to the next one.
And this one goes to Jeremy Vahill, and he puts in a 2. And I'm not sure what he said there. He said something in Latin. I don't know what it says. I'm scared to read it, Jeremy. But thank you very much for that $2 support. We do appreciate that very, very much. And we also just got a 2 that came in from the Playmaker 1271. And he said, y'all need to come to Chicago.
Chicago. I actually wanted to come to Chicago one day and see it. It's a historic city. It's the capital of railroading in America. Every single railroad in America fought to get into Chicago. And you can tell there are rail yards everywhere inside of this little city here. It's not a little city, by the way. And let me see if I can show y'all some of them. Here's one. Here's another. Here's an intermodal yard. Here's a normal classification yard. Let's see, moving on down. Here's another yard right over here. Let's see, here's another one right here. And then if we move a little bit further over here, here's another yard. And then here's another one down here. I mean, they're endless, really. Like, there are so many rail yards in Chicago. It's insane. And I was like, wow, that's so cool. I didn't know that until I started reading about railroads. Every single railroad in America fought to make it into Chicago because it was the perfect point geographically for a railroad to interchange with anyone else, because you could practically make it anywhere else in the country from Chicago by rail. And that's also something that you can see on Amtrak's modern railroad map, because most Amtrak services, at least the long distance ones, all roads lead to Chicago pretty much. And let me see if I can get a better one. Here you go. All roads lead to Chicago. This is the California Zephyr, starts in Chicago. This is the Empire Builder, starts in Chicago. The Coast Starlight doesn't, but the Texas Eagle starts in Chicago. This one doesn't exist anymore, the one that goes from Chicago to New Orleans. I don't know what service that is, but that technically doesn't exist anymore from what I know. Wait a minute, does it? What service is that? What the hell is that? What the hell is even that? Hold up, let me go to the Amtrak train tracker. Amtrak train tracker. And let's go find what that is, because I do not ever remember seeing one like that in my life. And that is a real route. What in the hell is that? Okay, we'll allow, because Amtrak's cool. Track the trains. And what do we have? Use control and zoom. So, this is the city of New Orleans. You know, I've heard of this train before, folks. I just don't know why I didn't know where it went. But apparently they actually have a north to south traveling train. But it also originates in Chicago, practically along with everything else. The Crescent, which comes through Birmingham, is a rare example of a train that does not terminate or originate in Chicago. It terminates and originates in New York City and New Orleans. So, pretty interesting with that. And also, I saw someone say, the city of New Orleans, the song was made after? Yeah, actually it was. There were a lot of songs back in the day that were made after trains, railroads, like the Wabash Cannonball by Johnny Cash, or the city of New Orleans. And let's see here. There were a million of them. I'm trying to think of them, like the Pennsylvania 5000, the Chattanooga Choo Choo. There was a million of them that were made like that. But anyways, with that, I hope that has addressed that well. And we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Flash One. And thank you very much, Flash, for that support. He put in a $20 donation. He said, hey, Enforcers, and hello there, and hello, Flash. He said, next weekend here is a grand final in our Aussie rules football. And if you get a chance, have a look. And I bet you don't get it. Ha, ha, ha. And I love the show and LSA.
Hey, I thank you for support, Flash One, and I will try and look into it a little bit of it. And I'll have to see what the Aussie rules football looks like. That sounds very interesting. I know y'all have like a totally different sport culture down there in Australia and New Zealand, and I'll have to take a look into it because it is fairly interesting to hear about. So a huge thanks to you so much once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running. I hope that has addressed that well, and thank you for being here tonight and supporting the channel. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one goes to Butchie777, who puts in a £10 donation. And thank you very much, Butchie, for that very heavy support right there, all the way from the UK. And we do appreciate that very, very much. And Enforcer, what say you?
And thank you so much for the support. We greatly appreciate you because you're helping us to keep this thing rolling and make this thing possible. And we are on to the next one.
And we have a 5 from Gray Squirrel 87, who said, come to Tampa, Florida, and have 2 deviled crabs on me.
Devil crabs? Now, crabs is one thing. Devil crabs, that's scary. What type of crabs are those? That's a terrifying prospect, right? Tampa Union Station. Oh, this is where the Carolinian comes through, or the Silver Crescent, or the Silver something, right? Like the Floridian. I was right the first time. The Floridian and the Amtrak throughway connecting service. Yeah, that's a terrible service. You know, Brightline's coming here eventually to Tampa.
Yeah, I've heard.
I've heard as well. It's pretty cool. But anyways, big thanks to you once again for support. I hope that does address that well. With that, we're on to the next one.
And we have a 2 from Mario Bermudez. And thank you very much, Mario, for that support while I choke. And Mario said, do you think that airdropping glide bombs is effective in war?
Generally, yeah. With the from what we've seen, they're fairly effective. They're a standoff weapon, so anything that's a standoff weapon will be a lot more effective than a direct drop over the target. And so with that, a big thanks to you for support. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And Cody Fritz puts in a 2 and says, have you ever seen Braveheart?
Yes. And I'll be honest with you, like, this isn't a political thing. This is just my personal take. I really do not like, in my personal opinion, any movies that Mel Gibson made that were historically based, because historically they're just extremely wrong in like every way. Like, I don't know why they had to be done like that. But they're not even close to the source material in any single way. And considering that I'm a really particular person about history, I just can never really get into enjoying those movies because of that. I mean, they're good movies, but when you look at them from the historical side, I just cannot stand watching them. So I have seen it, but it's not really my favorite. But still, a big thanks to you once again for support. I hope that addressed that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And we have a 1 from Laco Sam, who said, I'm late, and that's not how US-Mexico war thought in Mexico.
And I thank you for the support, and I unfortunately don't know what you mean by the second part. I think that may be lost to time at this point by the time we're hearing the super chat, but I do thank you for the support, and with that, we are on to the next one.
And folks, it is now time to jump into our Morse code decoders of the stream and
Huh?
also get some live chat questions. It is now that time. And once again, a huge shout out to everybody once again for supporting the channel through the super chats. And we do appreciate that. And it's now time to jump into our Morse code decoders. And tonight we had Paul Schultz, Kevin J, Mason Miami, Joni Dog, Norm Pritchett, Airbug Arbo, Royal Fluffiness, Kush, Kelvio Terex, and Sire. And I said the Morse code says, what in the hell does this say? Man, that boy be getting his ass beat in Pokrovsk. He needs some milk. LT LSA. Damn, you wrote that?
That's the sound of money. I did write that, and that was the Morse code message of the night. I totally forgot that that's what I wrote. Like, and when you read that, I actually got a real laugh out of that. He needs some milk. I was like, yeah, honestly, that was a pretty good one, though. And y'all did get that correct. I got to congratulate the Leaf Spring Army Signal Corps for getting that Morse code message correct. You'll get that correct time and time again, and today was a real treat. I was wilding on that one, and I totally forgot that I was absolutely bussin', no cap on writing up that Morse code message, putting a real Gen Z twist on it. Is soon to be the next millennials. And so with that, I hope that does address that the best that we can. A big shout out to the Morse code decoders once again. And it is time for us to move on into the live chats. Due to us not being constrained by time tonight, at least for the next 10 minutes, we will be answering as many live chats as we can for the next 10 minutes. So with that, take it away, Matthew.
So the first one goes to Taylor McLean, who said, how hard would it be for the U.S. to leave NATO and to fight against NATO countries?
It would be fairly difficult because we have so much economic ties with the NATO states that it wouldn't be as easy as just, chopping them off and then fighting them. There's a million different things that connect us rather than just the NATO alliance. But as far as leaving the NATO alliance, all we have to do is tender a letter of I think it's, I don't even know what it's technically supposed to be called, but we send ourselves a letter pretty much telling us that we're leaving the alliance. We accept the letter on our own behalf, and then we bounce. So it's a fairly easy thing for us to leave. But as far as going to war with former NATO states outside of NATO, that would be a whole other can of worms and would be extremely destructive to us in more ways than one. So I hope that does address that the best I can. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And we have a question from AF Kaplan. He said, regarding the heavy earthquake activity in the Kamchatka Peninsula, is there any evidence of Russian industrial activity that could be contributing to the sudden seismic activity?
We actually do not know at the moment. I do not know of any large mining operations that would create seismological incidents like this at this kind of scale. So at the moment, it's a little bit unclear why they're happening so frequently in that area. It might just be a seismically active region right now.
It's the Ring of Fire, isn't it?
Yes, it's directly on the Pacific Plate for the large part. And so it might be just seismically active right now, and it's just a very freak sort of an occurrence that this many are happening. But we don't really know of any man-made reasons why this is going on. So at this point, I think the easiest explanation we could give is that it's just unusually active in terms of the seismic activity within that area right now, and that's about it. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to R. And they said, did you guys hear that today a senator from Louisiana introduced a bill to unfreeze Russian assets and make them available to Ukraine to buy weapons for their defense? And I personally didn't hear that, R, but that would be definitely a good thing to do. So, that senator right there, I think that's the one that said, if you want some help, call a crackhead. Yeah, I think it's him. I think that might be him that said that. So, yeah, if that was him that introduced that bill, I would say good on him. That needs to happen. Russia needs to pay up. But Enforcer, what say you?
I'd have to agree. I think that's a good bill. That's great to hear. But one thing I do have to say is that sometimes you'll hear a lot of great things in Congress, and then the Congress just shoots that great idea down anyways. Like, I've heard a lot of great ideas from people in Congress recently. People say, we have to talk about shopping lists and we have to unfreeze the assets, all those sorts of deals. And then everyone else in Congress will just shoot them down. Like, everyone together. Like, it doesn't matter who it is. Like, it could be a Republican or a Democrat. They present a good idea and the whole Congress will unite together in telling them that stupid ideas aren't allowed. Smart ideas aren't allowed in Congress. Only stupid ideas are. And then they just shoot it down and then they keep going. So it's good to hear, but I don't really know how far that would get because everyone might unite together to shoot a good idea down like they kind of normally do. But anyways, with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Quantum Fighter, who said Latvia says it'll wait until wartime to lay down the minefields at their 30-meter deep militarized zone along the border. And what are your thoughts about that?
That's a terrible idea because minefields need to exist before someone invades. Because if you're trying to lay minefields in an active battlefield, it's really difficult to do because at that point they're probably conducting pretty swift breakthroughs, and there really is no way to set up an effective minefield because the minefield will just be bypassed by the time it's even set up. So I would say that's not the greatest idea. Minefields need to be pre-laid. That's how they work the best. So I hope that does address that the best I can. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Sly Bacon, who said, do you think that China will challenge us if we go into Venezuela? And I know that China has interest in the oil exploration.
They will lodge a diplomatic protest, but that'll be about it. I don't really see them doing much more. They rely heavily on exports to the United States for their economic stability, which is very fragile at the moment, like many countries, including us. And on top of that, Venezuela really is not within range of Chinese power projection capabilities at the moment. So it would be a losing fight for them to get involved in any way rather than lodging a protest and doing nothing else. So I hope that does address that the best I can, and we are on to the next one.
And this one is going to go to Daniel McMurray, who said, do you think Venezuela will attack first? And my opinion is that they will because the anxiety they have right now, and they have a better chance of doing some damage to the USA if they try to attack first.
I would say that they're definitely going to, because the U.S. is pretty much, from what I can tell, their rules of engagement are to not fire until fired upon, and at the same time, we are also issuing orders that puts us into provocative scenarios that would force the Taiwanese to eventually shoot at us at some point. So I would have to say I would also believe that the Venezuelans will fire at us first eventually, which is generally the plan. So if that happens, everything will be going according to plan. So with that, I hope that has addressed that the best that I can, and with that, we are on to the next one.
And we have we have a question here from Darter, who said, how long have we had hovercraft in active duty? I've never heard of them, and I always thought they were a Chinese and Russian thing.
We've had them for a while, and let me go see if I can pull up the specific model that we have, because we only have the one, and it's an LCAC, and let me go get that really quick. The Landing Craft Air Cushion. These have been in service since 1986, so quite a while, actually. These are used out of the back of LHDs, which are landing helicopter decks, which are the amphibious support ships, like the Iwo Jima and so on. But let's see here. And then we also had the ship-to-shore connector, which came before that, which these have been in service. Actually, sorry, these are actually going to be coming in service soon. They're in development right now. What are the ones that came before this? Because I think there was one that came before this system, and I want to make sure that we're not forgetting it, because we've had this ability for a little bit now, and I'm trying to see where in the world we have it. And I can't find them, weirdly enough. But we have 74 of them. And most of them are operated out of these LHDs. So we've had them for at least a couple of decades at this point. Hold up. Air Cushion Landing Craft. That's not ours. That's not ours. That's not ours. That's not ours. And that's not ours. That's the Russian one, actually. But pretty much everyone in the world has these hovercraft. Like the Chinese have them in the Type 726. And they don't have a lot of them, actually, but they have some. But anyways, with that, I hope that has addressed that well. And with that, we are on to the third to last question of the night.
And this one goes to Cody Fritz. He said, can this offer other countries justification to seize U.S. shipping boats, as it is inviting that by ignoring international law?
In a way, kind of, but not really, because it's really hard for people to say we are seizing a ship conducting completely legal commercial activities versus us saying we are seizing a ship that is involved in illegal terroristic operations and illegal drug trades. There's a little bit of a difference there, and I think, like, originally we had some questions of legality. I researched it a great deal. We always like to err on the side of caution with that thing, so these sides of things. So we were saying, I don't really know if that's internationally legal. According to maritime law, what we're doing is perfectly legal because these are technically terrorist forces. And also those involved in illegal operations. So we have the legal authority, one, because they're terrorists, to do whatever we want to them. And secondly, considering that they're involved in illicit contraband shipping, we can stop, search, and seize and impound their vessels if we would like. And if they do not allow themselves to be detained, for example, if they speed on and do not stop, we have the authority to fire on them and destroy their vessel and pretty much eliminate any of the crew members deemed necessary in that action. Not, of course, if they like jump in the water, you can't just finish them off. But by hitting the boat, casualties are accepted at that point. So with that, I hope that does address that the best I can. But it'd be a really hard jump to go from that to we can seize a container ship because America's stopping drug boats. So with that, I hope that does address it the best I can. And with that, we are on to the second to last question of the night.
And this one goes to It's GXBX, who puts in a 5. And he said, I love my Dominican people, but don't ever eat mofongo. And take one from the chat. And long live the LSA.
And thank you so much for the support. And what is mofongo? What is that? Let's see.
It's a dish with plantains as the main ingredient. Honestly, it looks pretty decent.
Yeah, honestly, it doesn't look that bad. What does mofongos taste like? Garlicky. You know what? I don't know if that would be good. That's a weird thing. Like plantains that are garlicky. The Dominican Republic is actually really nice, though. Like, look at this. They actually are the wealthiest Central American country now.
Oh, wow, that's nice. Probably because of tourism.
Yeah, they went heavy into tourism. And then you can see, because they're so wealthy and prosperous, you can see the divide between the healthy and prosperous Dominican Republic and Haiti. You can literally see it right here on the border. Like, the Dominican Republic is forested and nice. Haiti is like some sort of like a sun-scorched hellhole. Haiti is a terrible place. But anyways, with that, a big thanks to you for the support, and I hope that does address that well. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And we have a $20 support that just came in from LSA Rocks. And thank you very much, LSA Rocks, for being a channel legend and throwing in that super sticker right there. He said, you are amazing. And he's got the little YouTube creature with the cane. He's going around, and he is a happy lark right there. I tell you what. And Enforcer, what say you?
And thank you, LSA Rocks. You're amazing for helping us to keep it rolling. So a huge thanks to you again. Hope that does address that well. And with that, we're on to I believe it was the second to last question of the night.
And this one goes to Sire, who said, could the images of the J-20, the Chinese plane, be decoy images? That thing makes no sense stealth-wise.
I would say that they're probably not, because while it doesn't make any sense from a stealth perspective, the Russian Su-57 doesn't make any sense from a stealth perspective, and the Russians clearly showed that in their own camera footage, that its cross-section would be quite sizable because of its poor construction. So I hope that does address it the best I can, at least in my opinion. That's my 2 cents on it. I think that's a real J-20. And with that, we are on to the final question of the night. And so, who was the last person to throw in the lucky last question of the night?
And that viewer is Jam Fan, who said Russian nuclear subs were spooky, and could you imagine the conditions on a North Korean nuclear sub? And I'm more concerned about environmental damage than the strategic threat they pose.
Honestly, that is a little bit concerning. The North Koreans will probably mismanage a nuclear submarine and end up having a meltdown at sea, which should be impossible, but they probably will, because they're North Koreans and they really don't have a lot of access to technology or education or anything for that matter. Even food is a bit of a tough one for them. But I would have to say that is a quite interesting concern to have. I'd actually have to agree with you on that. That actually is probably a bigger threat than the strategic risks. And so with that, I hope that has addressed it well. And also, a big shout out to Ryan H, who threw in a 5 and said, hello, Enforcers. I rely on a Ukrainian-made wheelchair lift and learned today the primary manufacturing facility was destroyed in a Russian strike. That's actually very unfortunate to hear, Ryan H. And it once again is showing that the Russians are hitting things that definitely aren't military targets. But I hate to hear that. And hopefully, the parts for your wheelchair lift can be sourced elsewhere, hopefully in the meantime, but if not, that's incredibly unfortunate. But I do thank you for the support, and we've reached the end of tonight's stream, folks. I've got to thank you all so much once again for enjoying this channel tonight and watching. We had 93,000 viewers before this stream rounded out. Not the biggest one that we've had recently, but we have to humble ourselves from time to time, because getting nearly 100,000 views over the course of a whole stream is actually crazy compared to what we normally used to do historically. We also had a peak viewership of about 13.1 thousand people tonight, and I gotta say that we're entirely honored and greatly appreciative to have had each and every single one of y'all here tonight, and we hope that y'all have enjoyed greatly. If y'all did, please make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, as we will see you all tomorrow at 10 p.m. Eastern Time to cover the next 24 hours of the news from around the world. And so with that, good night, good luck, take care, stay safe, Slava Ukraini, Ram Slava, long live the Lee Spring Army, and long live the Republic.
And with that, good night to you all, folks. And thank you very much to all 93,000 plus people that joined us by the end of the stream. And we appreciate every single one of you. And if there is enough news tomorrow, by the way, I will be making a short war video midday and putting that out here on the channel to bring you all up to date with the news as it's happening. So we'll have to see what's happening early tomorrow morning. And also, in the meantime, be sure to join us again tomorrow at 10 p.m. Eastern for the next nightly war news stream. But in the meantime, Slava Ukraine, Heroem Slava, get some rest, and good night.